time on opening statements. Take your time and say what you need to say in your opening remarks, and then the next person, the next candidate will do the same, and then we'll begin the question and answer period. And I think probably a 5-minute answer time period is appropriate with only a few candidates, a couple of candidates. We'll see how that works out. It's quite a loose requirement. So we'll start. We'll start with Bill. Would you like to make your opening statements, please? Louder is better. Do I have to go? Do I have to repeat? So you all saw my mail out. That's basically my position. Still, I ask you to continue on with our work in negotiating a land claims agreement with Canada and British Columbia. In BC, of course, it's called the BC Treaty Process. The rest of Canada is called the Comprehensive Land Claims Process. I think the BC Treaty Process is a better process, and I think other provinces look to us as being lucky to have that. I've said also that we'll build on our successes. I think the Numblies are seen as a model by other First Nations on what we have done in our community and outside of our community. We have this building, Lawrence Amherst building. We have our school. We have our health center. We have our new hospital. We have our new big house. So we have a lot of things that other First Nations really look at with envy. I just came back today from a quick trip to Vancouver for the official marketing launch of Qterra, our land-based fish farm. It was held at the Albion Fisheries, who is our marketing firm. Safeway will be marketing or buying the fish from BC and Calgary. And again, it's another success story of the Numblies, seen as leaders in many different areas. And so I want to continue doing that for the Numblies. Not saying I'm doing it by myself. I work with the council in making sure that these things are made possible. So we do have a good council. We have a good administration, and nothing is perfect. We can continue improving on things, and we're doing that too. So I ask you for your support in moving on, and I still say that the only way we're going to make changes, and remembering that what we're working for is our children. We don't want them to go through what we've had to go through with lack of housing, lack of everything. So we want to give them a better opportunity than we had, and we can do that with a good agreement with BC and Canada. You, Pierre Kessler.
Gila Kessler. I'd like to thank everyone here tonight and those online for your participation and your attendance. I'd also like to thank our candidate, Bill Kramer, for his community service, his service to our community, and for bringing forward his vision tonight. I'd like to start by saying a few words about the agreement in principle and second vote, which seems to be the key issue in this election. And so the current reality is that we had 55% of those who participated say no and 45% of those who participated say yes. So what we have is a divided community. And we all know that the government has successfully used divide and conquer tactics on First Nations people throughout our history of contact with them. And let's not give them that strategic advantage. Let's take the time to build unity and consensus amongst our people. And I say that we could take 2 years to work on building that unity and consensus. That's not a step backward. That's not navel gazing. That's doing some really important fundamental work that needs to be done. And it's not a proposal I bring to you lightly. There's been a lot of hard work done over 20 years. No one wants to throw that out. No one wants to throw the baby out with the bathwater. But there's a really serious concern and issue around building unity in this community. I've heard so many families divided about how they see pro and anti, and it's a false dichotomy. We need to move beyond that, and we need to focus on building unity. So why is now not the best time to proceed with the second vote, and why is it a good time to take a couple of years to work on building unity? Well, first and foremost, we're going to be facing delays. And why do I say that? Well, there's a couple of developments that are going to occur over the next 2 years that are likely going to result in not a whole lot of progress in treaty negotiations. The first one is there will be a major decision by the Supreme Court of Canada later this year, the Chilcotin decision. And that decision will make major pronouncements about Aboriginal title. I was a commissioner at the BC Treaty Commission in 1997 when a similar decision was made, the Delgamuukw decision on Aboriginal title. The Treaty Commission hosted a high-level principles process with Canada, BC, and First Nations sitting at a high-level table for 1 year, trying to assess the impacts of that decision. And so when Chilcotin is decided, we can expect a similar delay of at least 1 year while the parties try to sort out what that decision means. That will bring us to at least 2015. Once we get to 2015, there's going to be a federal election. And so we're either going to get a new government or we're going to have the same government in power. And regardless of what happens, there's going to be delay. The new government will need time to sort out and give instructions to its negotiators about what its mandate's going to be, or the existing government will have to wait for the dust to settle. So that's going to get us at least to 2016 before there's going to be any serious ability for advancement in the treaty process as a result of these delays. So not only do we have the delay factor, if we were able to get a second vote and a yes vote and we moved on from there, we would be faced with inflexible federal and provincial mandates. And these issues have been around for a long time. They're not new. In 2008, there was established a common table made up of representatives from 60 First Nation communities throughout this province who all came together because they were tired of dealing with inflexible federal and provincial mandates. There was no movement on key issues such as certainty, resource revenue sharing, taxation, shared decision making, and a whole host of other issues were addressed by 60 First Nations together with Canada, BC, and First Nations at this high level. And these are the very issues that are stumbling blocks in our negotiations. So after 1 year of negotiations at the common table, the parties were not able to reach a resolution. So these issues still remain outstanding without resolution, and Canada and BC still have inflexible mandates around these issues. So what is the likelihood in 2 to 4 years that we're going to be able to turn those around? Well, not too likely, which means time and which means money and which means borrowing money for a long period of time unless we line up our ducks. So that's what this 2-year window would give us. It would give us the opportunity to line up our ducks, develop the best possible go-forward strategy if that's the direction that our people want to go, and not allow us to be sort of constantly set back by inflexible federal and provincial mandates. Again, we run into the same problem with fish mandates. Canada and BC have not had fish mandates in place since 2007. That's an entire 7-year period. So if we think somehow miraculously we're going to come back to the table and we're going to get movement on fish mandates in 2 to 4 years, I think that's not entirely how it might actually unfold. I could be wrong, but I could be right, in which case more time, more money, borrowing monies, trying to move mandates all alone. If 60 First Nations couldn't move mandates sitting at a common table, what is the likelihood that one First Nation is going to move mandates without a whole lot of support with others? And then there are a couple of more recent developments. Canada has recently adopted what's called a results-based approach to negotiation. Under this results-based approach, they're only going to negotiate with the tables that they think have the reasonable potential for success. Well, what does that mean? It means those nations that are willing to accept Canada's inflexible limited mandates are those that are going to go to the front of the line, and those are the ones that are going to get treaties quickly. Well, I don't think we want to settle for inflexible limited mandates. And so, then there's a challenge that we're going to be faced by Canada's current approach. So, that might change. If there's a federal election in 2015, we might get a new government in place and we might be able to get some movement working together with our allies, other First Nations, and doing our work inside our community to develop the best possible go-forward strategy. And finally, the most recent development is at the national level. There, in response to the Idle No More movement, there was established a high-level committee established by Prime Minister Harper, working with the Assembly of First Nations as of January 2013 to reform Canada's comprehensive claims policy. That body completed its work in December of this year. It made recommendations to the Government of Canada to adopt a recognition-based approach to treaty negotiations. And that the Prime Minister has yet to respond to those recommendations. So again, we're seeing a lot of foot dragging on a very fundamental issue that's important to First Nations across this country, foot dragging on the part of the government. So right now is not the best environment in which we can move forward and get rapid resolution of issues. We still are facing walls of inflexible mandates and delays that are waiting for us around the corner. So I say that we, rather than borrow between $1.2 to $3.2 million in order to fund our participation in negotiations over the next couple of years, with the likelihood of not getting too far given those inflexible mandates, that we take the time in our community to figure out what it is that we want, because we don't want to go forward divided. Do we want to leave anyone behind? Have we addressed everyone's fears and concerns? Well, I sure wouldn't want us to drag folks forward with their fears and concerns not addressed when we have this golden opportunity of 2 years to work out and figure out what it is that we want. And there's no rush. It's like rushing to catch a train that's stalled in the station. There's, if we're not going anywhere because of the delays of the Chilcotin decision and a federal election, why not take that time rather than sitting in a train for 2 years waiting for it to leave the station to do the work here at home in this community? I think we've got a lot of wonderful, great minds in this community. If we put them all together, we can come up with the best possible go-forward strategy. And so I would like us to take that time, and rather than borrow money, there's contribution money that's available through the BC Treaty Commission at any time for a First Nation that's in the BC Treaty process. That's not repayable. We could take the time without accumulating more debt over the next 2 years to do the important work that needs to be done in this community. And then there are even other compelling reasons. How would we then go forward if we had a second vote and if it was yes without mandates? In the short time between now and September, we're certainly not in a position to have mandates developed in our community. However, if we take that time over 2 years, all of the conversations that we have in identifying our interests, our objectives, our goals, options, solutions, will effectively become the mandate for our leadership to take forward into the future. So I say we take that time out. And then the final piece is that in order to get a final agreement approved, you need a double majority. You need 50% plus 1 of 50% plus 1 to approve. Now, what does that mean? That means we have 1,300 eligible voters. That means 651 of those eligible voters need to participate in a vote to approve it. We cannot even get 300 people to participate in a vote to approve an agreement in principle. Every election that we've had over the last year or two, we've not had more than 300 people participate in an election. That's a huge threshold. And if we're a divided community, we're not going to be able to reach that threshold if we just barrel ahead without building unity. So if we want to set the table for success, we need to take the time to build that unity so that when the time comes, there's going to be 651 people who are happily coming forward to say, yes, this is wonderful, or however it is that we want to proceed. And of that 651, 50% of those folks have to approve it. So I say now is the time to take that time out to work on building unity within while all those delays are going on out there, to not spend that money that we don't have to spend, literally banging our heads against the inflexible wall of federal and provincial mandates. So that is essentially my plan and my proposal for you on the agreement in principle. I have other elements addressed in my platform. Copies of it are available for you here. It's also available online. I'd just like to say a few words about two more issues, and then I'll conclude my opening comments. The first is around economic strategy, and I'd like to commend our leadership for the good work they've done in creating a lot of opportunities for us outside of our community. We have a lot of businesses that have been established that have the potential to generate large revenues for our nation, and that is a wonderful thing. However, we've not been as successful on the front of creating jobs for our members. A lot of these ventures outside of the community are, number one, they're outside of the community, so there's a commute factor. And, you know, yes, we're spoiled having opportunities in our community, and it is a challenge to have to commute outside of our community. But in addition to that, they're not labor-intensive initiatives that have been developed. I think the run-of-the-mill has a switch that you flip, so really it just takes one person to operate. It's not likely going to be a member of our nation. At the present time, our closed containment facility employs one of our members. I don't know, somewhere down the road, if we diversify and expand, there might be more employment opportunities, but that's not in the immediate future. Orca Sand and Gravel presently employs a handful of our members. So, you know, yes, we've done a wonderful job of creating ventures that have the potential to generate large revenues. We really need to focus on jobs in our community because that's what gives our people hope. So we need to create jobs in our community. So I'd like to work on a strategy that would involve creating space so that our own members can take the initiative and generate their own employment opportunities through designating areas where certain kinds of development can occur, assisting members with the development of their business plans, and in that way, our own members can generate employment opportunities for other members. And so less of the risk is in the nation's hands, but at the same time, there needs to be at least one major initiative created here in our community that will generate employment opportunities for not just a handful of members, but really targeting something that will generate employment opportunities for at least 20 to 30 of our members. So that would definitely be my goal over a 3-year term, to work really hard to make that happen. And finally, around accountability and transparency, I know that when a nation is really busy and it's doing a lot of good things, sometimes we just forget to have a lot of regular meetings, and in past years we've not had as many general meetings, and it's caused concern in some quarters among our members. And so, you know, I think that there's been a turnaround in that. There was a general meeting last year, another general meeting this year. And so I think that there's a perception in our community that there hasn't been a lot of seeking of approval for a lot of big decisions that have gone on. And I think that's just really a policy gap, and it's one that can be filled quite easily. And I think to set in place checks and balances, clearly define the roles and responsibilities. What is the community's role in approving? What projects need to come to the community for approval? We need to just have some conversations with one another, identify those projects, and then set out a policy that clearly defines that so that there's no opportunity for confusion about who's responsible for what. And it just will create more harmony in the community as we move forward, clearly understanding who's responsible for what. So those are my opening comments, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you.
And thank you, both candidates. We'll now open the floor to people that want to ask a question. They'll come to the microphone, be recognized by the chair, and they'll state their name, where they live, and then their question. And the question will be to both candidates, and they'll both get a chance to answer the question. So, first.
Just before you ask a question, Mr. Chairman, is there a time limit for question and answer?
Oh, yes. I did mention earlier, I think 5 minutes is reasonable because we have so few candidates. We've had 3 in the past, and that was because we were so restricted by time. But I think we can get through a lot of questions if we just use 5 minutes to answer each question. It was a little different for the opening remarks, of course, but for the questions, 5 minutes should do.
Mine's just about, as you were talking about our community and working, I was just wondering how you as chief, whoever would be the chief councillor, would help our people to keep jobs, like you say, on the island, because we have people working here that have left on stress leave or medical leave. And who our people could go to talk to. And when there's, like, living off the government, as I understand it, is our people lose jobs now because there's no funding anymore. So there's more of our people going off work here. So I just wondered, like, how you would be able to deal with that, or who the people could talk to and get a good answer, not just, oh, go talk to so-and-so or so-and-so and we'll find out. I just want to know what your part is in helping our people stay here, stay working, and stay healthy.
Okay, so that's a good question. And can we get your name, please?
My name's Annalisa Shaughnessy.
Okay, Annalisa, thank you. And Bill, you started last time, so it'll be Deborah beginning on this question, please.
Thank you. Your question really helps underscore our vulnerability if we rely solely on program and service dollars in order to employ our people. Right now, we're very fortunate that we have more than 100 of our members employed by government funding through different programs and services. So in order to address it at a longer term manner, the important step would be to build economy in our community. And by build economy, I say, you know, right now we have government funding, it comes in, and if we don't have businesses operating in our community, that money goes right back out again. So there is no economy, it's an in and an out, and the money vanishes. So if we, as part of the economic strategy that I outlined, can encourage our own members to establish businesses to help employ our members, then over the longer term, and then creating one more other major business in the community would help over the long term. The short term, a lot of the issues that you raised are more of an administrative issue. You know, I think there's an opportunity for some political guidance if there's you know, if there's a concern that somehow it's not being addressed with the current administration. So, you know, when you talk about stress leave and all those other sorts of issues, you know, one example of a potential solution would be to establish a human resources department so that rather than have, you know, so clearly you know who's responsible, so that if an employee is experiencing challenges, they can go to the human resource department head and then have, you know, sort of, and again, it's a policy vacuum. I don't know what human resource policies the nation has. But that's the usual place where, you know, where there are employee complaints, you know, that you would usually address that in a policy that would say, this is where you go if you have a grievance, and if you are faced with a decision that you didn't like. And, you know, ideally you'd want it somewhat arm's length from the nation or from the administration so that, you know, it's a fair process. And so I would say that over the short term, policy is one way of addressing this. Creating a human resource department might be another way, and some sort of ombudsperson might be a short-term solution or a more immediate solution. And over the longer term, it's creating more job opportunities in the community so that we're not dependent solely on government funding to create jobs to employ our people. Thank you.
Okay, you're right. In order to have a healthy community, you have to be economically healthy, you have to be physically healthy, spiritually healthy. And when you look at what's been happening in Alert Bay, it's pretty hard to develop businesses here in Alert Bay. So we have to look at moving to the island. Probably, if we want to do that, that means developing residential facilities for our people. And in order to do that kind of planning again, you have to have resources. And, you know, we've had community planning sessions. We have a lot of great ideas come out, but how are we going to pay for that? You can't do any long-term planning with DIA program dollars. You just can't, and that's why I say let's get by this agreement in principle. We can access resources to do treaty-related measures, human resource capacity building. That can all come after we've approved the AIP as we work towards a final agreement. I say it's going to take probably 2 or 3 years to get a final agreement in place, if that. But in the meantime, we'll have access to treaty-related resource money that we can do all this kind of work. Business planning, we could probably do some work restoring the Nimkish watershed as a treaty-related measure. I mentioned we could work on a fisheries plan as a treaty-related measure. You know, that's one of the biggest businesses that's possible still in our community is in the fishing. If we can assist our members to get the boats and the licenses to harvest all the different species within our area. So the resources that will be available to do that is after the agreement in principle is passed, and then we can move on to the hard work that comes after that. So.
Okay, next we're gonna take an off reserve, or rather a call in, or I don't know what you call it, an electronic question. This is from Victor Isaac. The question is, my question is on overlapping issues. I understand our chief and council has made deals regarding our hydro project by giving 10% of royalties to John Smith and his band. What is the process for overlap in regards to membership approval? Okay.
The question is, what is the policy on overlap issues?
That's as I understand the question, yes.
Do you want me to go first? Yeah. Okay, the overlap issue is of course a very, very big issue with our neighbors. We've sent them letters asking them to meet on overlap issues. It came to a head when we sent out a map identifying our traditional harvesting areas, because in a final agreement we don't want to be stuck just harvesting within our territories. We want to continue harvesting where we traditionally harvest before. be it through family ties, agreements with the chiefs of the other neighbors. So it's an ongoing discussion, and as I say, we've sent out letters asking to meet with our neighbors, and I think most of them are pretty understanding, except for maybe a couple that really doesn't understand what we're saying, especially in the harvest area. They think that we're trying to take that territory away from them. No, we just want them to remember that we used to harvest in that area before a treaty agreement. And because by entering into a treaty, we don't want to lose any of our rights. That's basically it.
Thank you. Well, I'm not on the council right now, and I think the question is asking what is the current policy. So I'm not privy to what the current policy is. However, what I do know is that the BC Treaty Commission process requires that each First Nation is responsible for resolving overlaps on its own. And I know a lot of First Nations encounter challenges where if your neighboring First Nations are not in the treaty process, it's really challenging to compel them to come to any sort of process with you. There's not a whole lot of incentive for those folks to come forward and resolve overlaps. And for those who are in the treaty process, there's a bit more of an incentive, but the requirement to resolve overlaps has not been strictly enforced by the Treaty Commission. And so really, unless we develop an overlap policy, and I don't know that we actually have one, then there's not an awful lot of guidance. So it's a bit of hit and miss and shoot from the hip in the absence of a policy. But certainly a policy would be one where you'd need to set the table. You'd need to develop an agenda of what are the issues that need to be addressed in terms of territorial overlaps, resource sharing overlaps, identifying shared territories, and you just follow the regular identification of the party interest-based negotiation, identify your interests, identify options for resolving your interests, and then work towards a resolution of those interests. But again, there's no guarantee. It's a negotiation, and so it could take a long period of time. So I guess it's a process that if we are wanting to conclude a treaty in 2 to 3 years, it's something we better be dealing with now, because it's not likely that that's going to be resolved in 2 to 3 years. So it's definitely a priority issue that doesn't always get the full attention that it deserves. Thank you.
Okay, the next question will come from the floor. Longo, just identify yourself, please, first.
When I heard what happened, so when she sat and said, okay, we understood, okay, fine. But I think they put these guys see, that's where the frustration gets to a lot of us. When you guys don't explain to us guys how things happen and what's happening and why it's happening. That's the other one is elected commission. This year is going to be a pretty good year. This guy looked up in the Gilman section. He said there's going to be one of these Gilmans. It's going to be fine to be home. And we don't have enough license for our guys. Yeah. He's not even going to Gilman. But I know we have a few $100,000 sitting in the office, which we have to spend a nickel on licenses of both. Like other traffic, but both licenses. We're sitting on it. Why? I don't know. But we can have to be water, let other folks wait on to get somebody else to get in. So, I like you guys to find that is in mind to get doing something. You know, I know, don't put on we got a plan now, because that plan's been there for 5 years. I know that.
Oh, this is a new plan. Yeah. Yeah.
For example, I keep it off my desk. Buy it, but then if buy it, I buy it, now you sell for $600,000. It's like, oh, you can have it. So you can do it. But I don't know why you can have it. I know I spent so much on it.
Okay, Deborah, this will be your first, you'll be going first on this one.
Well, thank you. The question is a bit challenging because it asks for specific information about an existing decision or policy by the nation. So rather than try to answer it because I don't have the information to answer it, I would like to say it's an example of kind of an issue that is of concern in the community. And I think one of the ways of dealing with issues such as that would be to create a process wherever there's a general meeting, 30 days or 60 days prior to the meeting, to make a call for resolutions from the members. That gives an opportunity for issues of concern among members to be brought forward in an orderly fashion. Members can develop resolutions, and then that gives an opportunity for testing the reality check on options. So, for example, if there was a proposal to bring forward proposal to expend $100,000 on the acquisition of new licenses, a member could propose that in a resolution. There would be an opportunity to run that through the administration to see whether or not that was in fact doable, and the parties could work together to massage the resolution and perhaps come up with a solution that would address an urgent need in the community. There's obviously going to be a good fishing year. We're not ready and we're not equipped to take advantage of that opportunity. We need a quick fix solution in order to address it. I honestly don't know that we could address it in the short time frame between now and a general meeting, but that's an example of a process solution to an issue like that. And just generally speaking, we do have profits and revenues that come from various sources, from forest revenue sharing, from the businesses that the band is operating. And I believe that there's a real need to have a community exercise where we identify community needs, such as the need to purchase licenses, the need to take care of elders, all these various needs in the community, and then prioritize how we're going to address those needs and allocate some of those profits towards those various needs in the community. So I think there's a process solution in terms of a nice way of bringing forward concerns in the community to general meetings where we can have constructive dialogue about these issues, and for also having a process by which the community can have involvement in how expenditures of profits are made. Thank you.
Okay, just touched a bit on the Cloudies business. They wanted actually a percentage of our partnership with Brookfield Power, and we said no until you can prove to us that you have a legitimate claim to the Kokish River system. We're not going to talk about that. And we met with them twice and said, bring us your documentation to support your claim. And they couldn't bring us any documentation, so we just said, well, that's too bad. It's ours. We have all the documentation that says it's ours, and you have no right to any partnership. But then the province, as you explained, has this policy. It's called a green energy policy, where neighboring First Nations get to share in monies earned by a green energy project like the Kokish River Hydro Project. They wanted 50% to start. We said, no, we don't even think you deserve it, but it's a provincial policy. And we said to them, they don't deserve it. I explained to them what happened with their claim to our partnership. And so it ended up that they said, well, it's a policy that we have to abide by. So they said, 10%, will you go for 10%? And as it's a provincial policy, we said, well, if that's your policy, I guess we can handle 10%. It's not our money, really. It's provincial monies. We get the 90%. But getting back to the fishing business, as you know, we have Joseph Isaac working for us as the I guess he's the manager of Mamo Mas, our fishing company, and he's been trying to organize the fishermen to meet and talk about how to move, especially with the monies that we have in the bank. And we had a meeting with the fishermen a couple of weeks ago. The old guy was there, and so it's start on planning on how to move with that. But I still maintain that we have an opportunity to do some real planning if we get by this AIP and treaty-related measures planning with fishing. You.
Okay, next question. Stan, I'll ask you to turn the microphone on. Apparently, the online people are not able to hear the questions because the mic hasn't been on. So just turn that on and then off when you're finished, please.
Employment. I think it's probably going to be the hardest thing in our community. When I look at the fishing industry here, we're in the turmoil here. We've got councillors that have been attending meetings. We have no reports. We have no plan. There's absolutely no plan for our fishing industry. Back in 1985, they sat down. The councillors at that time, with Pat Alford, I think Rob Royer was part of it. I think Sats went back to Calgary with the group, and they presented something to the minister back at a meeting in Calgary, and they talked about everything that we wanted here. We wanted, I think it was $750,000 to buy licenses, boats, gear, and that part had never went anyplace. And one of the things that I was thinking about too is that, you know, when you're planning, you don't need any money at all to plan. You just get a group of people together and toss back ideas about how you'd like to see things. Because it seems to me that our council, we like this turmoil because it employs a lot of people without having to answer to anybody for it. We've borrowed a lot of money to keep people employed here. And I think one of the things is we always got to remember is our kids that are going to pay for it. We're going to be gone before this thing's settled. And I'm pretty sure in my mind that we could have done something about the fishing industry long before this on a separate issue, because the Nachanlas have done it. They've jumped ahead of a whole bunch of different tribes on the coast here. The Sparrow case tried to help us, but we didn't jump on that either. Now we've got a big monopoly here, and we're really in trouble because even if you do buy boats there, who are you going to market to? You only got one person that owns everything. So we got no strategy for our people to fish. And I think it's absolutely critical that we get back out on the water as soon as possible. We've been trying to train young people to skipper boats, first aid on the water, radio operators, tickets and that. But I can't see where that's going to go because we don't have any vessels. They talk about people mentoring, there's only about 3 of us, 4 of us in the tribe that own boats, or that you can mentor. You can only take so many people on a boat. And I'm confused about what the band is trying to do here, because, you know, when we had this, the vote to move ahead with the AIP, you know, it was a resounding slap in the face by our people to reject the first vote. That was, to me, that was an automatic, what do you call, for the council to step down. There is no second vote. There is no treaty. We got none. We're so far back in the lineup right now, it isn't funny. So, confusion. I think the idea is we just keep borrowing money, and it doesn't benefit any of us on the floor here. It benefits the people that are working, and it's going to stay that way. I don't know. Hopefully, things are going to change. Ideas are going to change, whether you keep the same people in or not. Hopefully that we, as the people here, are going to be listened to, because we got to plan better than what we got here, because we've got nothing right now. There's nothing for my kids, and I'm in a little bit better shape than some of us, and there's absolutely nothing for them, for the other people, their children anyway. So.
Okay, Stan, if I'm not going to try to paraphrase what Stan has said, but there's fishing issue, there's transparency issues, there's process issues. I'll say, Bill, you can field this one first, and then Deborah follow.
I'll shut this thing off here, but this is the health of our people. Diabetes, heart attacks, you name it. That ocean is our bread and butter, our table. And if we can't get back out there again, we're going to end up having more sickly people.
Okay, did you say I had to go first? Okay. Okay, one thing that came out, Stan said, you don't need money to plan, but you do need money to put your plan in place. So the AIP wasn't a resounding slap in the face. The people in Alert Bay narrowly passed the AIP. The people in Vancouver narrowly said no. It wasn't a resounding no vote. There was only 20% of our people that voted. And from the questions that we had at the community meetings, it was evident that our people didn't really understand what the AIP was. So that's why we went into this new plan to educate our people by the home visits and to answer any questions that they have about the AIP. And that's been going on now for about a month or more. And so after the home visits, then we will be meeting our membership at gatherings with the Treaty Caucus prior to the September vote. And a no vote in the AIP, this really doesn't mean it's a no vote to the treaty. It's a no vote to the AIP. And there have been many First Nations who had their AIPs voted down, but they went back to their people and gave them more information about it. You know, some of the things that people were saying about the AIP is that we're going to spend the $72 million on programs. No. That money goes into a trust fund for the future of our children. Saying that the program dollars are going to disappear from DIA, that will never disappear. That's all going to be part of a final agreement to be negotiated every 5 years or 10 years. And they also said, well, you know, even if we get land, our land's going to disappear. They're going to steal it back. Well, that's not possible, because that land is going to be protected by the Constitution of Canada. Those are the kind of questions that our members were asking at the community meetings just prior to the first vote. So it was evident to me anyway that they didn't really understand what the AIP was. You're right, mentoring. We talked about that at the meeting we had with Joseph Isaac. Important that we start that mentoring process, especially with the old guys ready to leave us. And training, RB's been training people. We had the heavy duty equipment guys trained. They all got jobs. So yeah, it's just and the borrowing money. That's the money that we borrowed. It's still up for negotiation. Doesn't mean we're going to pay it back. It's up for negotiation. And the other people that have reached final agreements. We had a visit from Cayucot. I think they were from the kids from Cayucot. Visit the Lisa Aguilar School. They're part of the Manus that signed final treaties, and they're doing quite well with the agreement they got. They can negotiate agreements with Canada as a nation-to-nation basis, not an Indian band negotiating with the Department of Indian Affairs. I don't know what happened to our last newsletter. I made a comment in our last newsletter. Let's get healthy here in North Bay. Let's get jobs. Let's teach language in our school that give us the spirituality that we have that goes with the language. And but we can't do that without resources. And we can get those resources after the EIP. I went to a meeting in Vancouver sponsored by the Department of Indian Affairs, and there's just page after page of the things that you could do with treaty-related measures, and you don't have to pay that money back. So let's get past the AIP and get into that process. Thank you.
Thank you. You raise an important issue about the importance of fishing in our community. It is an important source of livelihood, but it's diminished significantly over the years. But it's also important to the transmission of cultural knowledge and for those who go out and take care of our food fishing needs. So without fishers in the community, we're in danger of having folks who don't know how to go out and fish. They don't know where the good fishing grounds are. So it is a critically important issue. And, as Bill pointed out, and as you pointed out, you don't need money to plan, but it is a solution that requires money. If you're going to go out and buy boats and you're going to buy licenses, money is required. And so, what are our discretionary sources of revenue at this point in time? Well, without a treaty, we have some profits from businesses. That's pretty much the only source of revenue other than going cap in hand to government to try to seek money from government, or somehow creating a really sound business plan where you can go to a bank and assist our members in getting financing to go out and purchase these kinds of licenses and fishing vessels. So there are no quick fixes, and they do require money, which comes back to a community planning process about how we spend our little bit of discretionary money that we have. So, we do have some profits from businesses. Over the next few years, these businesses will become more profitable. If we put in place a planning process now that sets out priorities and identifies where we can allocate monies to fishing, to elders, to other needs in the community, the sooner we get moving with a process like that, the sooner we'll be in a position so that someday if there is a treaty and there is $72 million available, well, we've already got a sound process in place as to how we're going to allocate these various resources. And so really the issue you raise requires a money fix. And, we need to then look at what monies we have, putting in place a process for prioritizing those needs in the community and allocating some, but not all. I think it would be foolish to spend all of our resources addressing community needs. We need to preserve some for the future, for future generations. We need to determine what percentage of the monies that we could spend on this generation in order to take care of current needs. So that's what I would say. And, we obviously have concerns around food security as well. If we can't get out onto the waters and we can't harvest seafoods, which have been essential to the good health of our people, then we're in serious trouble, particularly when you think about the situation in California where there's serious drought now, so that if we think we're spending a lot for fruit and vegetables in this part of the world, we'll get ready, because this year we're going to be spending a whole lot more simply because of conditions that are going on out there in the world beyond our control. So we really need to be turning to our berries, to our traditional foods, and to food from the ocean in order to meet our needs. So that's all that I want to say on that. Thank you.
Okay, this is, the next question is from, it's a mail-in or a mail-in, call-in, or I don't, punch-in, or whatever it is they do. Ivy Piers is asking, the youth in Alert Bay are lacking resources for recreational activities. There is nothing for the youth to do, so they turn to technology, and those that can't afford to really have no venue to go to. When I was a youth, there was a teen center, sports, activities, etc. Will this be revived so that youth have healthy activities to look forward to and be able to socialize in a healthy manner? I'll ask Deborah to field this one first, please.
Okay, well, I don't know what kind of current programming is available through the nation, but I understand that there are some activities, some after-school activities, so we're not entirely without programs. However, we don't have a dedicated youth center. We have an elder center, but we don't have a dedicated youth center. And again, it's one of those things that requires a whole lot of resources in order to build a youth center. We could perhaps, use this recreation center as a sort of a combined rec center and combined youth center. But again, it doesn't have the nice little breakout rooms where you can go and do crafts and do all sorts of things. So I guess in the short term, it doesn't look like there's going to be an opportunity without a major infusion of cash in order to create opportunities for youth. But you don't always need a facility. There's lots of things we can do. We can, I think we do it through Clakwagila. We get people out on the land. We could organize lots more of those activities that not only just create activities for our people, but help pass on cultural and traditional knowledge. So I haven't given a lot of thought to this question, but I would say that we're not entirely lacking in programming and resources for the youth in our community. There's a whole lot more we could do. Over the long term, it's a big money solution to actually put in place a youth center, but there's a lot of interim steps that we can take to create more opportunities for our youth. And we have to put our money where our mouth is. If we say that the youth are our future, well, we better start investing in our future.
Okay, I agree that we are doing some, but not enough. The Sasata group is an example of what they're doing with our youth, teaching them language, dance, and even making button blankets and all those other things. That's good for our kids to know. We need again resources. We need to put things in this center, probably even expand it to have an equipment room, maybe pool tables, all those other things that you could go and see are in other recreation centers that have the resources to buy these things. We probably need a full-time recreation director here, a trained recreation director in the center, but you don't get any of those dollars from the Department of Indian Affairs. There's no dollars for recreation. So we'd have to do some creative planning through our administration to get monies to even operate what we have here in the rec center. But there's a lot more that we could do. Again, it boils down to resources.
Okay. I'm just going to ask that not only that you turn the mic on, Sharon, but try to keep questions to single issues because there's so many overlapping questions and issues. We we do have quite a bit of time. We can get to all of them if we just kind of, frame a question and present it. Okay, go ahead, Sharon.
Okay, one thing that I'm really concerned about in our community is a severe shortage of housing. I would really like to hear what innovative ideas that you have to address that shortage and do something. It's like so overdue. So many young people, so many families have been waiting on the list. I mean, we can go back to the 80s. People are still on that housing list, and so we really need to do something and be very innovative and immediate. So interested in hearing what ideas you both have.
And Bill, that would be your question first.
Okay, well, you're right. Again, resources. We were talking about what you can do with money in a bank. People keep referring to the $72 million. I think we can negotiate a lot more than $72 million by the end of the day, probably over $100 million. And that could be a bankroll that we're not going to touch. But the interest from that could be used for housing. And because we have that money in a bank generating revenue, we'd be able to go to financing arrangement with different, be it central housing and mortgage or the banks to finance building a bunch of houses at once. You're looking at in this area, about $200,000 plus for one house. So 10 houses, that's $2 million. So in order to catch up with our housing needs, we have to have the resources, and with the money that we would get in a final agreement, we'd be able to negotiate financing with different organizations. It's the only way we're going to build houses, with resources.
Thank you. One possible innovation is inspired by a court ruling in Eastern Canada. The Mi'kmaq went to court to prove that they have a right to harvest forest resources on their lands for housing purposes, and they were successful in court on that decision. So that's the Gray and Sapir decision. So an innovation that can flow from that is we could actually go into our territory and we could harvest resources in there. And if we were able to get an Alaska sawmill or whatever those are called, transport them out to the various reserves that we have up and along the river, we could harvest forest resources in the vicinity standing on the precedent of Gray and Sapir, and we could mill our own lumber. And, if we could, mill enough lumber to build 5 houses every year, well, that would be $40,000, I think, is what it costs to frame a house. So, there's one option of an innovation where we could actually go out onto our land, create employment opportunities for our members, and actually be using the resources in our traditional territory in a modern way to address our housing needs. So that's one example of an innovation. But the reality is we're up against serious challenges because reserve lands can't be mortgaged. We essentially are limited in the sort of solutions that we can look for. As Bill mentioned, we could go to the banks and somehow try to assist members with securing funding through CMHC. I didn't realize that it's actually not been done in our community. That's certainly one innovation that we could look to in terms of getting a jump start on some of the shortages that we're facing in the community. And so we actually I looked at this issue because I really was concerned about the housing shortage and wondered about solutions. And unfortunately, there's been a national effort by the Assembly of First Nations, a task force there to address housing issues. And it's not met with a lot of success because ultimately it requires a money solution. But, the Gray and Sapir approach, as well as, again, I keep talking about the profits from the businesses, and I know that they're not extensive. They could be more over the years, but it's one of those exercises as a community that we need to go through to say, what are the greatest, most pressing needs in our community at this time? Obviously, housing is one and fishing is another. our youth is one, and our elders are probably another. Those are four that immediately come to mind. And if we could have a conversation or some process through which our members would give us that direction and say, these are the most pressing issues, and recommend how much out of our profits that we'd want to get, and not just a loan, not just community members. Obviously, there needs to be money set aside for future investment, for future generations, but what percentage of that money from profits could be used today for these pressing purposes in our community? So I think that's, a solution that comes from us and from the innovation and the monies that are generated. And I really like the idea of that, because then it's not dependent on some outside source in order to address. So, there's some small and some big innovations that we could take, but it is going to take time to chip away at the big chronic shortage that we're facing. Bill Kessler.
Okay, someone will approach the microphone, please. Make sure you turn it on first.
Okay. Hi, my name is Yvonne Wolf, and I live in Port Hardy. I'm from the Numgace First Nation. My question is around program and services. We're told we get $15 million a year, and I work for Numgace First Nations in the caring field. So my question is, we're being told that there's cutbacks to our fundings, and we have to do more with little. And I've gone out into the job market, and I'm capable of supervising 5 to 6 people. But in my community, I don't have that credibility to supervise my own staff. So I was wondering what the ban was going to do around self-sufficiency, about us taking care of our own if we're going to be looking at agreement and principles and doing treaty. Because I think the only way we will be successful is if we're taking care of our own. And at this time, it doesn't seem to be that way, that we're offering our membership, leadership roles in our community and working with our children and families, working within our organizations and leadership roles. We are getting better at it, but I feel that until we're doing it 100% or close to 100%, that we're nowhere near ready into taking care of ourselves in treaty, that we're still relying on the outside world to caretake us. So we're still a part of the DIA Act. So my question is what is Nimkish Band's initiatives around doing, having their own people taking care of their own and developing programs for themselves with this money that comes in through programming, and negotiating with the federal government's policies that work for our nations instead of using the paintbrush that they use for all First Nations when they're dishing out the allotment of cash? I could go on and on.
Okay, Deborah, I believe you're in line for this. Is the microphone off, by the way? Please turn it off. Thanks, Art. My understanding is this rather generic question is specifically toward the health care. Is that right? In your health care? In everything. Okay. Okay, Deborah, please.
We're wanting to move beyond the governance under the Indian Act, and what governance under the Indian Act means is dependency on government funding. And, with all of that comes this sort of, we haven't always had trained people in our community who could step into roles and take over roles. So we really had to depend on people with the expertise and skills required on a number of fronts to come in and do this work for us. And so, one of the dreams and the goals that we all have is for our own people to be in these positions one day. And I certainly would want to support that through some kind of mentorship program. And so I would really encourage the development of a mentorship program that set out clear goals and objectives and a clear path with a checklist. What are the skills that you need in order to run this program? Now, this presupposes that someone's also gone out and they've gotten the training that's required. But when you come back, you don't always have the experience to bring. And, that's where, you either have to go out there somewhere in the world to get that experience, or if you come home to get that experience, well, then it would be nice if we could offer a clear path that made sure that you got all the training that you needed in order to do that. That's not to say that there's any desire to put aside the people who are currently here working. The whole idea of mentorship is that if a vacancy occurs, you would fill it with one of your own members, so there's no desire to not value the contributions of those people from outside our community who have come here to take care of things and lead things on our behalf. It's just simply saying that, without experience, it's going to be really hard for our own people to step in. And, in a nice, loving environment, we could ensure that our people get the experience that's required. And, not to take over and replace anyone, but if a vacancy occurs, then somebody can step in and take that. So I totally support mentorship because it is really challenging to go out there and get the experience that's required. And so, I think that would be a really good way of supporting our move away from governance under the Indian Act and dependency to an independent process where we become self-sufficient, drawing on our own people to fill positions within our community.
Yeah, thank you. The problem, of course, is sure we administer $17, $18 million on different programs under Department of Indian Affairs and Health Canada. We have to run by their policies, which includes qualifications. If a person, the Numglees, has the qualifications, they normally would get the job. To say that we're not ready to take over looking after ourselves, I don't think, of course I don't agree with that. I think we are ready to. I'll give an example of the people in the Yukon. When they first signed their what they call a final agreement, they had 90% of the people working for them from they were non-Yukoners. But now, after so many years of treaty implementation or final agreement implementation, they now have only 10% non-Yukons working for them. Their people have trained to take over those jobs throughout the what they call the implementation stage of the final agreement, which is what we'd be doing. Once we sign a final agreement, there's probably 10 or more years of implementation to make that treaty work by having our people working for us, doing the jobs that's required after a final agreement.
Okay, Art, it looks like you're in line there. Just make sure you turn your mic on, please.
You. Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff coming up. But a lot of the things that's being brought up was brought up by council a few years back. I was on council for 14 years, and I saw many things fly, and I saw many things get thrown out the door, and I see a lot of stuff, 90% of the stuff on the shelf. We have general meetings, and we have questions asked at general meetings that never get answered. Just the one meeting we were at when my brother Billy Wasson was on the chair of the ad hoc committee, that we answered the questions that the people asked. And in Victoria, my nephew, Chaz Cook, asked about the structure of what's happening with the economic development, and the things that were brought up. He pointed out that it's a communist regime, all controlled by the Nimkish band, and there was really no incentive for anyone to be able to make a sustainable living because of the way the structure was set up. And this is what I would like to ask. One of the questions I'd like to ask is that, is there anything for an individual who's going to be 65 in June to get anything from the band to enable to live a prosperous or whatever life, because, you know, there's a few of us that have reached the age that nobody's going to do anything for us in the outside world. And it's good that we look to our youth, but sometimes there's times where you have to look at the guy that's got a last kick at the can. And, you know, are we going to be able to become independently wealthy, and instead of having 5 kayak beaches and leasing them to kayak outfits, instead of putting our outward bound graduates to work doing something for themselves? And, you know, at the meetings we had some really brilliant ideas come from the youth, and they got put on the shelf. It's time to take that stuff off the shelf and put it into works, so we can honestly say we've done something. The jobs that are out there right now were jobs for construction, and it's now gone. You know, when we started the hatchery, the closed containment at the river, our admin was ordered by council to send 2 people away to get training in the United States where there was a similar project happening. It never happened. And when the time came to get our people to work over there, nobody wanted to stay there because there was no pay equity. $10 an hour. Half your wages go to traveling and eating. And another thing was that Linda Warnock came home to work with the band, doing the similar work that she was doing in Vancouver. And lo and behold, she only got 48% of what she was making down below. So there's no pay equity within our people here to come home to. And all of this stuff makes us look like we're just managing poverty, not prosperity. And there's no incentive for anybody to move forward to. So within our economic development, I think that we have to look at the youth and the elders. You know, since I got elected in '99, we made plans to have an elders council and a youth council and get them to work together. But all we did was pay lip service to that. It never happened. It's now 2014, and it still hasn't happened. So that kind of stuff has got to come off the shelf in order for us to progress. Because of the youth, they're a lot smarter than us, I'm telling you. And there's a lot of things happening within the fishery department that could be picked up, because Greg and Arnie have been working their asses off, but there's nobody here listening to them. When we try to have meetings, they made sure that they weren't here. I was on at that meeting, and I told those guys it's not right to have a meeting without them guys. So we can't come and say that nothing's being done, because they're doing a lot of hard work. Thank you.
Okay, Bill, I believe you're in line for this. It's quite a broad question regarding elders and youth and a number of other issues. I won't try to paraphrase you. Go ahead.
Okay, you're right, Art. There is a lot of stuff that's been talked about here that we've discussed, and it's on the shelf. One of the major plans was the small boat fishing fleet, which had a price tag of $30 million to it. That would allow our young men to go fishing on a nice boat, fishing all of the different species in our area and other areas. But $30 million, you know, is a lot of money, and so there has to be some financing plan put in place to take that off the shelf. You know, I was down at the Albion Fisheries, the brand new plant, and no kidding, it's about 100 yards long and probably 50 yards wide. And they have freezers in there that take care of all of the fish that they bring in. And there was a statement made that there's only one buyer in BC, that's Jimmy Patterson. Well, Albion Fisheries buys sockeye salmon from Kamchatka in Russia, and they fast freeze it over there. They send it over here, and they keep it frozen in their plant, and that's what they use when there's no fresh fish, no fresh sockeye. And I was watching them fillet it for. I said, "What's that for?" And the guy said, "Oh, that's for the white spot for their fish burgers." And that's from Kamchatka. So if we had a freezer plant that could freeze the fish that we catch, we could do the same thing. Send it to Albion. There's a lot of different things we could do, but it needs money. And I agree, Art, that we're just managing poverty with what we have to use to put our people to work. We don't have that many resources. We do have profits in some of our companies, and it's already been said, we need to start planning on how to best use those profits. We do offer different things for individual members, business planning. If they want advice on business planning, we have somebody on contract to do that. So we do have that. One of the things we talked about to get the economic development happening with the Numgays is to start a development corporation that would be an umbrella for all of the business opportunities that we have in BC. But again, it's a plan, but it needs money to be put in place. Thank you.
Sort of reminds me of a royal commission. A lot of money, time, and energy with a lot of great hope gets poured into a process where all these wonderful, grandiose solutions are developed. It's like having a Cadillac with a budget for a Lada, and just it gets really impossible to implement these grandiose plans that get developed. And often these plans are one-hit wonders. You know, we get this wonderful RCAP process. There's, you know, the sort of the Manitoba Commission, all these different bodies come up with these recommendations that ultimately get put on the shelf. Well, I say that we have this opportunity over the next 2 years to sit down together and not only address issues relating to, you know, the long-term vision that might come with an agreement in principle, but all these other short-term issues in the community where we can together work out solutions for these longer-term processes or longer-term issues. And so one solution would be a process that has a beginning and an end that will ultimately have an action plan or an implementation that comes with it. So we're not just going to sit there and plan and then park it on a shelf. You know, we're going to sit there and we're going to plan, we're going to develop an action plan, we're going to bring that action plan to the community for community approval, and those are the marching orders then for the leadership to say, okay, here's your marching orders, you now have to go and implement this. So the job of the leadership then becomes to go find the money, to go knock on whatever doors need to be knocked on to find the money, because part of the solution lies in money. But, you know, there's lots of different things that can be done. You know, if we want to pass on traditional knowledge, and if you have the knowledge because you've been out there fishing, you know, we could support members in developing guide outfit kind of enterprises. They're not a huge investment. There's a great need for that out there. If we want to move in the direction of ecotourism, you know, we could certainly encourage that kind of development in the community. You know, and you're right, we need to take care of those who are vulnerable in our community, youth who don't always have a voice and their needs don't always get addressed, and those who are approaching retirement who, you know, through downturns in the economy do not have the good fortune to have a big pocket of money socked away and are likely going to need to continue to work. So through this community process, we'd identify what are the vulnerabilities in the community that need to be addressed, and we focus our energies on developing a plan to address those. You know, they take time. but I'm putting a 2-year window around this. You know, it's a pretty ambitious plan, but in 2 years we could accomplish a lot and get a lot of marching orders ready, and just, you know, that's the mandate for the leadership to then move forward and find solutions that are not just solutions that are developed solely by the leadership. These are solutions that would be developed by the entire community. We'd all come together, and we'd really be counting on you to come out and support a process like that, to identify the solutions and to reality check those solutions. You know, sometimes we come up with great ideas, but they're just not feasible. Well, let's do that exercise together, determine what's feasible and what's not, and let's move forward with what we can with what's feasible. So that would be my approach to addressing the question you raised. Gila Kessler.
Okay, the next question is here on the computer. I'll read it out. It's from Elizabeth Hanyus. Tell me, where do you see us standing, being off reserve with treaty? My concern is health. With no help, a single parent, my son has rare conditions. I have to pay some things now. Once treaty, one medication alone that is expensive that come from the States that cost $20,000 per year. When treaty is said and done, where do we stand living off reserve? My son's one transplanted kidney is to date now declining. What are you going to do to see that we are not shoved to the side because we are off reserve? I need to know where our elders, our long-term people like my son off reserve stand. Are you seeing our band pitching in after treaty? Seriously, this medication keeps him alive. And I believe, Deborah, I think you're next.
Well, one of the first important considerations with any monies that would be discretionary, that would come from treaty or anywhere else, is it's monies that belong to all of us. So it wouldn't be up to just the leadership to determine where those monies were going to go. It would be up to all of us to have a say as to how we're going to spend those monies. So I see it as not just being an exercise by the leadership to determine that. You know, the leadership could certainly take a role in developing recommendations, but those recommendations would need to come back to the community. There would need to be some dialogue amongst our members about how we want to proceed. But I would certainly recommend that we identify those most pressing needs in our community, and obviously the health, you know, whatever isn't covered by continuing programs and services would become a priority. Because obviously if it involves the health and life of our members, and if their lives are threatened by not being able to access medicine, well, we'd certainly want to look at solutions in order to fill that void, like Blue Cross. You know, how much would it cost this nation to buy extended health coverage for our members, for each member, or for those members who are the most vulnerable? So that, you know, without a whole lot of expenditure, we could find a solution that would take care of the needs of those most vulnerable, the elders, and those with really chronic diseases. So that's just an example of putting our thinking caps on. But, you know, the key point is we need to identify the priorities and then work towards finding solutions to address them. So I certainly wouldn't want to see anyone with a serious disease that requires $20,000 for a solution to slip between the cracks. And I think it would be incumbent upon us to look for solutions. But again, that decision needs to be made together, because it's collectively all of our money, not just the money of the nations to spend on your behalf. Gila Kessler.
Thank you, Liz. After the treaty final agreement, the health care that's provided by Health Canada, now provided by the First Nations Health Authority, is going to continue. As you probably have read, the First Nations in British Columbia have negotiated with Canada to take over all of the healthcare delivery in British Columbia, and that's about $300 and some odd $million budget. and it's different from Department of Indian Affairs, who are always cutting back a few percent every year. That healthcare budget will increase 5% every year. Now that's being looked after by the First Nations Health Authority. The way it's set up is Vancouver Island is one region of that authority, and we have 3 members, one from the Nuu-chah-nulth, one from the Kwakwaka'wakw, and one from the Coast Salish, that sit on the Health Council, which is the members of the Health Authority Society. And these kind of things that Liz is talking about her son, probably will be dealt with by suggested extended health care coverage. The First Nations in British Columbia will be making their own guidelines on how the healthcare budget now is spent. And just further, one of the reasons why we're wanting a final agreement with BC and Canada is that so that we can attract our members to come back to jobs that we will create as a result of that. So, yeah, we're working for all of our people.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next we'll take a question from the floor. George, I believe you've been in line there. Just turn the mic on. And
Yeah, okay. I'm George Alford, youngest member. I don't know, that's a good question, Chair, because my name's been on that list since I was 18. I'm now 57. So, never got a house yet. I'm elder, oh my God. But there's a couple things I want to say before I ask my question. One is that Stevie Bean said to me before I went to tonight's gentleman, he said, George, remember when him, Billy was, and there was Andrea Sanborn, they had the Economic Development Committee. And they went out and they met with this fishing outfit. They saw our plan and said it was adequate enough for them. They had a big major fleet of draggers and the same fleet in the summer and whatever, crab, all that. They had a plan to process through our plant, go to Port Hardy, fly it to China and Japan. And it was turned down. Stevie said, the reason I resigned from the bank council and quit getting involved in bank politics, because the core group didn't wish nothing to work while my dad was chief. So that's what wrong there. Bill, and when Stan talks about going to Calgary, I got a really good memory. It was when Mulroney was in there. We signed an agreement for 100,000 talk a year for the Nimkish Band for food fish. Where's that agreement? It's not there anymore. Second of all, we were going to get 40,000 talk a year to pay for a fleet. BC Packers offered 10 sailboats for $1 million. You can't even buy a kilnet for $1 million now. And you know who stopped us? The NFA and the Native Brotherhood. I could tell you that because when we asked about it later, how come that thing fell through? The Native Brotherhood and NFA stepped in and said, don't let the Nimkish Band go ahead with this. But the main thing I wanted to say here is I don't have my glasses. But I wish I had reading glasses. Because anybody, but I want people to know the truth.
George,
this is a question. Okay?
I know. I just want to ask you to move to a question.
I've done this before. I know how this works. How are you going to understand my question when I don't understand what the hell I'm talking about? Because I talk deep, eh? Okay. The Guilford Island, we've been asking to meet with the Guilford chief. Arthur Boy was still in council then, a couple of years back. We've been asking to meet with the Musqueam chief to talk about the overlap. They said they've never got a letter from the band or a call from the Nimkish Band to meet with them. Why? So, and I said last year when Coke had a feast for his, for Katie, my beautiful niece, Katie's daughter, they said, no, we haven't got it. So I brought it up in the last 3 caucus meetings. Oh, they don't want to meet with us. No, they never got a letter. The Musqueam chief never got an answer. My cousin Jody Wilson. I said, yeah, we've been asking for 2 years to have meeting with you after I had an office set. She said, Nimkish Band never got a hold of me. I'd be willing to meet with you right now. How come they keep telling us in caucus that Jody Wilson's too busy? She's not. She said, I would like to meet with you. Okay. My question is here, Bill. When, you know the reason that we can't get any more out of the AIP? Because you initialed it that year. And that, we were sitting there and at the caucus, we were going, what happened here? They grabbed that poster right behind you and stood outside all that, treaty commission and thought that we agreed to it. And said, no, we didn't, that wasn't finished yet. Like, for example, the health asked, was the hospital part of the health? Is the hospital part of the treaty? No. Why? If that hospital shuts down, we're in trouble. But here's a letter, I want to clear this up, and here's the last sentence on there. And we don't know this in a caucus. I'd like all the caucus to verify what I'm saying here. The last paragraph of that thing says, September 214, Nimgit citizens will be voting in agreement in principle. The Nimgit says the requested used to be, unless urgent, we'll meet with you after the AIP vote. We've been asking for a meeting of the Muskmat chiefs for 2 years now. We didn't say we're going to meet with them after the AIP. Now, how does that caucus, when we ask for something, get stopped? And who stops it? Thank you.
Okay, Bill, I believe that you're first on this one.
I didn't understand the question.
Jody said we never had a conversation or a question meeting. We asked for that waiver. Okay, the other one, if you request meeting with the Muslim, they said no. We never got a notice from the band. That's why every other city or bitch got their treaty all separate from the band office. The contribution to the band office involved and stuff. But it says right here, we won't meet with your wait with you until after the AIP vote. I don't think our conference said that. I think no. Where does it stop? That's a valid question.
Okay, you can see the problem we have if the questions aren't formed clearly enough. They become part of many different issues overlapping, and one person's or a group of people's recollections in that. So, if you can respond, candidates, do that, and then we'll move on.
Okay. Who's first? Who's on first? Me? Okay, the letter went out to the Muskava. I could tell you that for sure because I signed it. The business about Jody being invited to come and meet with us, I brought this up with Jody many times. All we had to do was arrange a date that was suitable for her. So, caucus discussions. You were part of the caucus, and if that was an agreement in caucus, then I don't know why you didn't speak against it then. But the initialing of the AIP was a process that allowed Canada to go to their people, allowed BC to go to their people, and allowed us to go to our people. So we did that. We went to our people, and you know the result of that. So that's the only reason of the initialing was we all agreed that we would now take this to our bosses. I guess that was it. Yep. Yep.
Well, in part, this question requires specific knowledge of certain events in order to fully answer. I have secondhand knowledge of some of this, so I guess I can answer from the perspective of my secondhand knowledge. I think what you're saying is that you have this understanding that sometimes direction is given but not always followed through. Okay, well, I guess who would be responsible for that would be whoever your administration is. I know that at one point I had some responsibility for a follow-up, and there was a request for a letter to go to not the Musqueam chiefs, but to the Musqueam Tribal Council. So letters have been directed at the level of the Tribal Council rather than the specific chiefs. I don't have any recollection of a specific request for the letter to go to the chiefs directly. We don't have a list of who the Musqueam hereditary chiefs are in order to follow up on that. But my understanding was the direction is that it went to the tribal council and at that level, not at the level of the hereditary chiefs. Again, I do have some personal knowledge of the request to Jody Wilson-Raybould. She was intended to be invited as a guest to a treaty conference hosted by the nation, and it was going to be a very full and comprehensive treaty conference that addressed lands and resources, governance, procedural matters, and alternatives to treaty. And because it was so comprehensive and the treaty conference planning committee wanted to ensure that there was enough opportunity for members to have a opportunity to speak in discussion groups, the conference was broken up into 2 groups. And so there would be 2 separate keynote speakers. So the option was to have Sophie Pierre, Chief Commissioner Sophie Pierre or Jody Wilson-Raybould be the keynote speaker at one or other of the 2 conferences. The second conference deals with alternatives to treaty. The regional chief, Jody Wilson-Raybould, has done a lot of work at the national level addressing comprehensive claims issues, and so she would be in a better position to speak about at the alternatives to treaty, not just as a keynote speaker, but possibly as a guest speaker as well. So it would cost a lot more to bring her to both events if she was a keynote speaker at one and a speaker at the other. So the Treaty Conference Planning Committee made a decision to invite her to the second conference, which is the Alternatives to Treaty Conference, where she could be both a keynote speaker and guest speaker. So it's just the logistics of splitting up the conference in 2 that has resulted in no follow-up and a request from the caucus to bring her to speak to our people. The opportunity now is sometime in July when the second conference will be held.
Okay, the next one, before you, we're going to take the next one from our call-in off-reserve. It's from Doug West. How do you propose to involve off-reserve membership in a more meaningful manner? Okay, I believe, Deborah, that's yours first.
Well, as I've indicated, I would like us to engage in a process of dialogue over 2 years to identify to develop a vision, to identify our interests. You know, what is it that we wish for the future and how are we going to make it happen? And what are some options that can make that happen? So in the course of having that discussion, I see this happening not just here in our community, but have it occurring amongst all of our members, regardless of where they live. We're obviously going to have to make use of technology in order to have meetings that involve all of our members, but we could also be hosting meetings in communities such as Vancouver and Victoria and Nanaimo, or wherever there are concentrations of our members. So I would say that the whole discussion about how we're going to involve off-reserve members is something that you need to tell us. So I'm not going to sort of say that it's my place to develop that. I think together we develop that. So we have a conversation together. We get a lot of options identified by people about how they want to be involved. And then we reality check all the various options that are identified and determine the best way possible. So I think it's a joint exercise where we work together to determine what people want. Because I can assume what people want, but there's a lot of dangers with assuming. It's best if people say to us what they want, and after saying that, then together we evaluate the interests and the options and determine how we're best going to meet the needs of our members regardless of where they live. That would be my approach to involving members who live away from home. Gila Kesla.
Okay, and Bill?
Okay. I think probably to explain what happened and what went wrong with our community sessions in Vancouver, Victoria, is that not many of our membership attended the community sessions. So we decided after that is that the best way to communicate with our officer members was a direct mail out with information. And they had the responsibility to come back to us with questions on the information that was mailed out to them. We have officer members participating in the development of the Constitution. I think there are 4 members, 2 from Victoria, 2 from Vancouver, that are taking part in the development of the Numgi's Constitution. So that's one area where they are taking part. And the other, of course, is the home visits that are happening right now in Vancouver and Victoria, similar to the home visits here in Alert Bay, where our membership there ask questions about the AIP, and the people that are working with our home visit teams answer the questions. If they don't know the answers, they come back later on with the answers. So we're trying to do that, and but until we find out a way to get all of our members at a community meeting, it's pretty hard to justify spending thousands of dollars for those meetings. So the end plan was just to send out the information to them and give them an opportunity to give us the feedback. We can't as candidates talk to our membership in Vancouver, Victoria, because we don't have their addresses or their phone numbers. So that puts a little crimp into our ability to talk to them. So yeah, we're open to suggestions from our members that live in other places in Alert Bay.
Okay, Benny, I think you're next. Turn your mic on, please.
Like I need it. It's on. Ben Wilson. We talk about salmon, fishing, all that stuff. How about let's worry about our valley. Let's worry about the salmon that go up our valley. So we need going to bounce around here to get money to generate revenue. How about putting in? Let's enhance our rivers with the money that we get from sand and gravel from the hydro project, so that we enhance our salmon. So we're not worrying about getting a fish boat. We just go over to our river. And if we do sign a land claim and they say we're not allowed to go fish in the ocean, who's to say we can't stop fishing in our valley? Our fish are all there. We have every species. Why not we enhance that by generating revenue from these hydro projects, saying 10%, 15%, 12% goes to enhancing our systems, which will make employment, get the young kids involved, build our valley up. And with the valley, what else we got? This is gold, you guys, in the future. And I don't see nothing in our AIP, in our land claims about fresh water. If we can't have salmon, we won't have this. And if we don't have this, this is gold in the future, guys. So, Mike, I don't know if it's a question or to what you guys plan on doing with the hatchery in the future. You talk about Kamchatka and their salmon and the river. They have 50, 60 hatcheries, sockeye hatcheries on that river. That's why they get 100 million fish come back. We have 1. If we want more fish, put more hatcheries all up and down there, which enhance. The hatchery that's over there now is a fish farm. They do it for money. They don't do it for enhancing our system. Okay? There's another one that you can say, enhance those ones. Let's enhance our system. So what does the band have planned, and you have what you have planned in the future for that, and having a resource, okay? Because Canada has 60%, I might be wrong, 60% of clean net water in all the world, okay? Vancouver Island has 20% of that water. BC has like 30% of that water, and Vancouver has 20% of that, untapped, okay? We got a little bit of forestry around our sides. So, what do you guys plan on doing about that in the agreement in the future? Because The government knows this about water, and we're falling way behind. And the salmon part, enhance the system. We don't need the boats. Need a net, need a weir. Take the ferry, go over to the boat, go over to the river, get your fish, get your canned fish, get your food fish. We make enough of it, we can have young people go over there and catch 100 fish and sell it to the non-natives. You can have your big freezer plant. We could have our kamchaka. So what's you guys' plans in the future for hatchery and for water?
Okay, Bill, this is yours first, please.
Bill first? Okay. Okay, as you know, we manage the Guani hatchery under contract with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans. It's not our hatchery. We manage it for DFO. And we did, at one point, plan to ocean ranch chum salmon. But we had the equipment to do that. We had trouble with DFO on how we were going to manage the fish that returned, because that's under their responsibility. And I said, well, let's get the fish first, and then we'll worry about the management. Again, resources. Yeah. We will be getting monies from the hydro project, and if we get a final agreement, we will also get an extra $1 million a year in water taxes that would normally go to the province. Can't hear you. I think this is not supposed to be a dialogue. You asked your question. I'm going to answer it. So, yeah, we have a chapter in our treaty on water. We will, in the end, control most of the water in our valley. We've identified the volume of water there. We've identified the volume of water that Port McNeill uses, so we know all of that information. And we'll be managing that water in the valley. You're right, enhancement, that's how they get all that fish in Alaska, is through enhancement. But the difficulty is working with DFO, because they manage the resource. And I've mentioned before that after the AIP, we can do a treaty-related measure to plan some big things for the valley. Thank you.
The interesting thing is that each of us have something that's really important to us that we're identifying tonight. You know, we've heard about fishing and being involved in the commercial fishing industry, the health issues of our members that aren't being fully funded, and obviously if fish is important to us, then we want to ensure that we have a supply of fish for future generations, and so that's going to require some investment of money into enhancing our river. So these are all the competing interests that need to be identified, and they need to be tied to a vision. So what is our vision for the future? Well, we want healthy, sustainable communities. We want fish for future generations. So once we've identified our vision, then some of the options to address it would be, yes, we establish a network of hatcheries up and down our river system so that we can sustain fish for future generations. You know, and as Bill pointed out, these do take money, and we do have some limited resources. So it's a very small pool of money that's being stretched very thin already. But what we really need is to go through that exercise together to identify those priorities, and not forever and not an endless process that goes on till the end of time. I'm saying it's a 2-year window where we sit down together, we develop that vision together, we identify options together, and we develop a plan on how we're going to make that real and make it happen. And we move forward from there. So I see, you know, people who are concerned about a hatchery would be in the law of 2 feet come together in a breakout group or in a discussion group that would focus on that issue, and they would come up with some recommendations and options that they would bring to the plenary of all of our people when it came time to make decisions about how we're going to move forward. Those who are more interested in health issues or have pressing health issues could come and be part of a health dialogue group that would come up with solutions that would bring forward to, and again, as I said, it's not an endless exercise. It's got a 2-year window around it. And, you know, it's a window that's not directed towards just getting another pretty report that we stick on a shelf, but an action plan that says these are the marching orders for the leadership. And then the leadership is then measured on whether it's delivered or not on the actions that are set out in the action plan. So I see that as really the way that we need to move forward is we need to really focus and come together and all put our energies into developing that vision together, which is a mandate for the future. If we don't do that exercise, well, what direction does the leadership go in? We'll be like a canoe floating in the ocean without GPS or a compass. We'll just be aimlessly wandering around in different directions. And you also point out about the crucial importance of water to us. And, you know, it's kind of interesting that the provincial government has taken the position that it owns all of the water, but we have reserve lands, and we own the water on the reserve lands, and the federal government sort of owns that water on our behalf. So clearly it's a political choice that the government has made. They're certainly willing to recognize our interest in water on our reserve lands, but when it comes to the rest of our traditional territory, they're not willing to recognize that interest. Now, of course, we have water allocations and reservations set aside, but we sure as heck want to ensure that we have a really strong voice in managing that resource, because if the fish is dependent on good, clear water to survive, and if fish is vital to our survival, well, we darn well better have a really strong voice in managing that water body that flows through our land, because otherwise, you know, there's a famous quote from the Bolt decision that says, "What good is the right to dip your net into the water and bring it up empty?" That means, you know, yeah, you might have a fishing right, but if you don't have a say in how it's managed and the resource becomes depleted forever, well, you have an empty right now. You have a right to dip your net, but no guarantee that you're going to bring up any fish. It's an empty net. Same with us with water. You know, what good would our water right be if somehow it's become compromised because we don't have a strong say in the management of that resource? So, you know, obviously there's some areas where we could improve things a little, and I'd certainly hope that that would come out in the conversations that we have together when we're developing a vision together. So thank you, Gila Kessler.
Okay, next from the floor, just make sure you turn your mic on there and identify yourself for those that don't know you, the few that don't know you.
Yeah, it was already on. Gila Kessler. Just want to say, wish you guys luck on your endeavors for your election. I think it's going to be a good election. Some of the questions I have was one of my old ones, and I bring it up all the time, and I'll bring it up again because it's important, is the youth training and the skills that they need to get us where we need to go to if we go in treaty or we go in alternate use of getting ready for our future. I state that because it's important. I think it's their future we're playing with. I think the youth are very important, and I think the elders are just as important. So that's one question. I'll just let you keep it in contact there, Mr. Chairman. The other one is the mandate that was given to us by Chief and Council, and it is a fishing issue. And we've told Canada and the province already through our negotiations, because of them taking fish off the table, that we would do our own fishery based on 35-1. So I would like to see that somehow happen, and I would like to see some words come from leadership on how we would mentor that together with the portfolio holders to start working on that dilemma to make it happen. Because there seems to be, and I keep saying, roadblocks of us going ahead. And a lot of stuff has been shelved. Chief has indicated on some of that. But you know, when you talk about those shelves, when you look at the breakwater, for instance, I was working on the breakwater project. I think it was about anywhere from $10 to $15 million at that time. What it cost us to put that new breakwater in to deal with tourism. I think even right now we're looking at $30 to $50 million. And another perfect one is the village that we were going to set up for Dumgies for tourism at the hospital site. We had good visions and good plans and went accordingly, but for some reason that got shelved. And it's probably really lots to do that now. So that's my little thing about shelving things, is cost you an arm and a leg more a few years later for material. My third question is, should this in all our setups that we set up, and this is something we've been working on in fisheries also, trying to indicate that to the Chief of Council how important it is to look at a long-term vision, have a vision set, have your strategic plans in order to get to that vision. And that's a 7-8 generation plan. Not just saying stop at that 7-8 generation, but let the 7-8 generation be the starter, the vehicle and the tool to get to where we need to get to. And that's planning together, and that's something I think Deb's talking about. And that, I see that as important. I see that as unity. I see that as working together. And I see that as something that connects us all to somewhere we might want to go. The other one is I wanted to bring up is the guani hatchery. Talking to my counterparts there now, and the two of them are 65 years of age now. And we as Numgies haven't sent anybody in regarding training to take that position. I don't know if we're taking that position as important as we should be. To me, it's a very, very important position for us to fulfill, because that's our lifeblood, and that's where we want to go, and that's what we want to protect. And so I just I see that as important. I want to know how you see that. As should there be training now to counter those guys that are getting elderly in there to make that happen, because we're in a bad position there. And as a fisherman, I'm certain I've been listening to this over 30 years about certainty and access. And I would like to see that certainty and access come about. We have lost probably 95% of our access of the backbone of Numgies Nation that made us a proud nation and important to the economy. We've lost that, and we've got a couple skippers, 2-3 of them now, that are over 70 years old. So, I mean, if they turn around and lose their company boat, or turn around, Stevie sells out, or whatever, these things are very important. And I think there's no use, somebody said that earlier, mentoring. If we're not going to have something there, the tools to be able to do the job. Our nation was about 700 strong not too long ago, 30 years ago. 1,700 strong now. And they all want fish for their diet. And we don't have the tools to be able to do that job. We need to start working in that place of the 3151 fishery of making that happen. And we can make that happen, I think, but I don't, all the chiefs that came for the treaty, that are in treaty, every one of them said, and I quoted it, that business and politics don't mix. we've been asking for the last probably 15, 20 years now for a congregation of where we can gather our fishermen so our ideas and stuff could come to the plate and our plans could be put in place. But we can't seem to get there, and then in-house as portfolio holders, it's very tough to get our plan there. We have lots of plans. We have lots of plans, but we can't get it there. Even the one we prioritized for this year, hopefully it's going to happen. We talked about putting our bigger ice plant this year. Talked about a fuel station. We talked about an ice chute. All those things are priority for possibly this year, but I think this year's kind of late, getting late now. So I think we just got to start putting our money where our mouth is and start moving with some of our plans. If they're priorities, then do it before the value or the highlight of it washes away. So I just want to hear a little bit about that. There's about 5 questions there, Mr. Chairman. So
Okay, thank you, Greg. Just turn your mic off, please. Okay. Deborah, you'll be first on this, please.
I was afraid of that. Okay, on the question of training for youth, I think a critical step before all of that is we need to have a really good inventory of who are our members and what are the skills that each of our members have. And, you know, some of that work still needs to be done. You know, it's really difficult to plan if you don't have an inventory of your people, your population. What is our demographic? I think that we have 1,300 members who are of voting age, who are 19 and over. And out of 1,700 members, that's a pretty significant population of people 19 and over, which means we don't have a whole lot of youth. And then we'd also need to have a really good sense of where are the gaps in our administration that we need to fill. You know, what positions are going to come up in 5 years? And that kind of segues into your discussion about succession planning. You know, if we don't have people to fill in positions at the hatchery, you know, it would have been great if we could have done some succession planning around that. And part of the need, and you know, all of these things require resources, but maybe we can rejig some of our existing resources to fulfill these functions. For example, human resource planning. If we had a human resources department, that person would be in charge of saying, well, you know, over at the Guani Hatchery, we've got a couple of folks who are close to retirement age, and if we don't have someone in sort of trained and ready to fill in that position, we're going to have to do some recruitment outside of the community. You know, so that's not a great thing. And so, you know, obviously we need to do an inventory, and I think we're kind of poised and ready to go with the really good information management system that the nation's recently adopted. It's an information superhighway, and it's the basis on which we can start filling in all this information, which again segues into a community planning process. We need to not let that community planning process stop. It needs to continue, because through that we'll get sort of the you know, sort of the vision of where the community wants to go on issues, together with our inventory and filling in the gaps like succession planning and having a human resources department. You also touched on the fishing issue and the mandate to Chief and Council, and wanting to take some action towards just do it strategy, just going out and exercising our Section 35 rights. Well, I think that's a great idea. It requires a really good plan, though. What is the scope of our right? We need to know that before we go out on the ground. And, you know, we have a right to harvest for food, social, and ceremonial purposes, so that's unquestionable. But we need a clear plan that ensures sound management, that takes care of conservation, because that's the only thing that trumps our Aboriginal right to harvest is conservation. So if we're going to have a plan, it needs to address conservation, and it also needs to have a really good system in place about distribution. We all know that there's tons of folks who don't get food fish each year, and that really is something that needs to be addressed if we're going to be exercising a Section 35 right. So there's a bit of work to be done, rolling up our sleeves and getting a proper plan in place before we just head out and start exercising our Section 35(1) rights. So I think, that's something we want to work towards, because we don't have to wait always for a magic wand to be waved in order to actually just start exercising our rights. But it's something that needs to be done in a coordinated and organized way. That's leadership, that's government. That's not just leaving it to people to go out on their own. It's providing a good solid framework for the exercise of that right. And, in regard to fishing rights as well, the new channels have been successful in establishing a commercial right to fish. I don't always support litigation. I think negotiation is the preferred alternative. But I think now's the time that we start looking at whether or not we need to go to court to establish a commercial right to harvest. But again, that's something that's not without risk, not something I say we proceed with without having caution. And the caution would be, you get an opinion. You get a legal opinion. You look at whether there's an historical record to support the existence of a commercial right to harvest. These cases really rest on the existence of a historical record. I think there were anthropologists in the Howsett case who said they saw Hudson's Bay traders who said they saw the new channels with canoes full of fish off to trade. So that was the smoking gun in that particular case. So hopefully we've got a smoking gun if we start looking at our historical record, and if we do, well, then maybe we have a basis for going forward, but maybe we don't, and we'll find that out if we proceed down that path and take that first step of getting an opinion. And also, you talked about the long-term vision and strategic planning. I don't know, the exercise that I'm talking about for the next 2 years is a planning process. It's developing that vision. And if the vision is taking care of our people for 7 to 8 generations, well, what does that look like? That's certainly a conversation that we could have. And like you said, it's something we need to do together. So that's exactly what I see as this process over the next 2 years, would be engaging in that exercise together. I already see the agenda for that meeting and that process unfolding here. There are many, many issues. So obviously it's a process that's going to be quite involved, and it's going to require everyone's input for it to succeed. So, if this is the path that we eventually take as a nation, I would strongly encourage everyone to come out and be part of that planning process. That's the only way that we can get to a better future for all of us, and to preserve our way of life and to protect our Aboriginal rights and titles and our territory. It's going to require all of us. So, we all need to do our part. So, Gilakesla, for your questions.
And Bill? Okay, talking about training, not only with youth, but all of our members. We've actually done the human resource survey in our community. That included the age, grade level, even went as far as whether or not they had a driver's license. You'd be surprised at the number of people who didn't have driver's licenses, which you pretty well need if you're going to get a job, especially outside of Alert Bay. So Randy's doing a good job on that. He's working with North Island College, Camosun College, Vancouver Island University on what's required for training. And I know even Satch has talked about succession planning, because he's getting to the age where he's going to have to retire soon, and we're going to have a new band manager. And Verna's not spring chicken either. So, that's all that discussion is happening now. Fishing. I know at our treaty table, when the federal negotiator said fishing was off the table, you all noticed I didn't get all excited about it, because I said at that time, we'll develop our own plan. And that could be part of the small boat fleet that we have on the shelf. How many fish they're going to require to make a living? How many sockeye they're going to need to catch every year? How much halibut? if they're going to go clamming, how much clams do they need, everything, prawns. I was just reading or listening to the CBC the other morning, and they were wanting people to apply for this job of packing prawns off a freezer boat in Port McNeill. So it's a huge fishery that we're not involved with, and that's an area where our small boat fleet would be able to plug into. So there's an area that we can do our own planning. Never mind the DFO. If they think we're doing things right, let them take us to court, not us take them to court. Just a bit further on, somebody mentioned the Nipchish River sockeye. If we only had a proper counting fence, we'd be able to harvest. I know some years there's been 140, 150,000 go up, and if we can know when there's maybe 100,000 up there, then we could start harvesting the rest without endangering. I've asked Michael Berry about a simple way of counting the fish, so that we can harvest the fish when we know that there's enough upriver already. It's just simple things like that is preventing us from taking advantage of our own fish. Economic development, tourism. We're a part of the Wilamola project that included Nemo Bay, New Vancouver, the Umispa Cultural Center, Kinkham, Guildford, New Van. How the tourism operators want one single organization that they want to deal with, rather than having to deal with all the single members of that organization, so that they can do their booking 1 or 2 years at a time or before time. And so that's just the way that the tourism operators work. They have to book way ahead of time. The breakwater, you're right, it's $7 million just for the rock work. And small craft harbors won't do that because they already have a breakwater that the village of Alert Bay is managing. But talking to the mayor, we could develop a breakwater as part of that existing breakwater. So that's, we just have to agree to work together to do that. The old hospital, it was part of a tourism plan. We're going to make that a convention center type operation. There's drawings. Our friend Sam Balf had a friend of his, an architect, do the drawing for us free of charge. And it's there. It's on the shelf. Again, resources to do that. And it would have been a nice looking convention center. So the idea of the old fishermen, we talked about that when Joseph Isaac was having our meeting, that we need to get an agreement to hire these old guys to take young people out to show them how to seine, how to make nets, and all the other things that are involved in seining, if that's what you want to do. Yeah. So even gill netting, the gill netters here could take young people out gill netting and show them how to gill net. Yeah. So all of that's been talked about. Some of it's been done. Just do what we can with what resources we have. I think that was it.
Okay, we're going to take the next question from the computer here. I'll read it off. It comes from a George Morrison, and the question is: even though the majority of membership resides off reserve, and almost all other First Nations across Canada have urban representation on council, why have the Nomgis refused to open up seats for urban representation term after term? Okay, I believe Bill will start this off.
Bill? Okay, this has been talked about for quite a while now. we, as you know, our present regulation is that you have to live on Alert Bay to run for chief and council. And that's the reason why we got Bill Wasden now, because we changed the rules. And but it's been talked about. I know that's part of the discussions at the Constitution table. That's a decision that has to be made by our members. Chief and council can't make that decision. They can bring it to a general meeting, and there would have to be a vote by the membership to do that. So it's up to the membership.
I would just simply echo the response provided by Bill. The election regulations say that any amendment of the regulations requires the approval of 2/3 of the members. So if there's a desire to move in the direction of amending the election regulations to include more representation of members, not just off the reserve in Alert Bay, but beyond that, then there would need to be a proposal that would be brought forward to the membership for the membership to vote on. But it would certainly be consistent with decisions that have been made by the courts around it. I think the Corbière decision not only extends the right to vote in elections to members, but it also, I believe, includes the representation on political bodies. There'd be, of course, a number of challenges to overcome. I don't believe the Indian Affairs Department provides funding for the participation of members through travel. I know that the Nisga'a Nation has representation of urban reps who are on their governing body, but they have to use resources available to them to provide for transportation for members to come and participate in the government process. Absent those kind of resources, we'd be seriously challenged. But I mean, it's not a reason to not include members who live away from the community, but it's a consideration in how we make it happen and implement it if that's the direction that the community wants to move in. But there are also technology solutions. We don't have to always be physically present in the same room to have a meeting. So, you know, I'm sure that if we explored technology options, we could probably find some solutions to that. So those are my thoughts in response to that question. Gila Kesla.
Okay, the next question will come from the floor. Does someone want to move forward and turn the mic on and state your name and ask your question?
Tracy Cranmer.
And Winner Rufus.
We're standing up here together because we're one of the 3 home visit teams in Alert Bay. And I just wanted to first say, Deb, it was nice working with you, and it was sad to see you go. So, which brings me to my question. We would like you to explain why your stance and responses to the AIP have changed since accepting this nomination. For example, flip-flopping on key information the home visit team was given by you before and since your nomination. It is eroding trust. There's a perception of deliberate misinformation in communications. And it was about the 2, under your agreement in principle and second vote, about the lands that we were going to receive. That was one of my questions. And that we were going to be bumped to the bottom, that we would lose our priority. We came directly into the office to ask those, and you answered us one way to bring our answer back to the people for the AIP, and then when you accepted nomination, you went the other way. So that's my question.
Can you elaborate on the last part?
Well, it was, I came to you with one question in the first week about the lands we were going to receive when we signed the agreement in principle.
Yes.
And the answer was, yes, we're going to get those lands. And then the second one was a question that we got from somebody who told us that we lost our place in the priority for negotiations. And you emailed me and Edwina on that one and told us that we hadn't lost our place and that we were still negotiating. The first one came back as yes, the land is going to be given with the signing of the AIP.
Okay. Well, first of all, it wasn't a decision that was made lightly about running in this election. And I submitted a proposal to our chief and council on May the 7th of 2013. And that proposal sets out exactly what is set out in my platform right now. I proposed to our chief and council in response to an open letter from chief and council where they said to members, if you have any proposals, please submit them to us. And it was, well, we've now had this first vote, and it's no, and we need to know how we're going to move forward. So I took that as an open call for a proposal, and in response to that, I said we need to take the time to develop vision together, to identify our interests, and take an interest-based approach on how we move forward because our community was so divided and we needed to bridge. So, you know, for anyone who reviewed that proposal, my particular approach that I'm recommending should not come as any surprise. I can actually take that proposal and post it on my webpage, and I can take that proposal and post it on my Facebook page as well. So that proposal was submitted to Chief and Council. So what I'm doing now is entirely consistent with the same approach that I was taking there. And then when I decided to take this position, really wanted to ensure that our members were informed about an agreement in principle that has a significant impact for the future. I'm not opposed to an agreement at all. What I'm saying is we need to take, and what I want is the best possible agreement, which we all want, the best possible agreement for our people, and one that's supported by all of our people. And that's the challenge that we face right now. This agreement is supported by all of our people. So we don't want to leave anyone behind. We need to bring everyone together. So again, I'm coming back to my original proposal, which said, let's take the time to identify the interests of all of our members. And so getting back to the question that you posed about the lands, I think what you're talking about is there's this supposed agreement so that if we sign an agreement in principle, we'll get lands from the mouth of the river to Beaver Cove or something to that effect. You asked that very question, and I don't have the answer because I wasn't privy to those negotiations. So at your request, I asked the head of our Natural Resource Department for an answer to that question, and he told me, go talk to the lawyer. Go talk to Eric. And so I went to Eric and I said, okay, Eric, Doug says there's a side agreement and that I should contact you so that you can provide me with a side agreement that I could then provide to Tracy so that she's providing correct information to the membership. Eric advised me that he wasn't aware of any side agreement and that I should go talk to Doug because Doug would have the information. That was where it was left when I left the organization. It was, no, talk to Eric, talk to Doug. So I left it with them to provide you with an answer. So I don't know that anyone's given you an answer. I have no knowledge of the questions that you posed to me, so I had to go seek the information from someone who had the knowledge. So if I somehow misled you that there was a side agreement or that we had that, I don't believe I ever said to you that there is that there is written proof of this side agreement.
Well, you did say yes, there was, and then I went out and I was telling people, and then I came back, and then you said, no, don't go there.
Well, no, that was a good point you raised. You asked whether there was, and I asked, and they said, yes, there is. So I shared with you the information that, yes, there is. But and you came back the next day, and you said, well, is it in writing? And it's like, because you didn't want to go out and share something unless you could have it confirmed in writing. Well, I went and asked then. And so, you know, if I've misled you by giving you information based on what I was told, because I don't have firsthand knowledge, I wasn't there at the negotiating table, then, you know, that was a serious flaw in the answering process. And you were right to ask for a written proof of an agreement. And so no written proof was produced to me. So then I was not able to produce written proof to you. But I don't think it can be characterized as any attempt on my part to mislead you. I was merely conveying information that had been provided to me. And, you know, in the early stages of this process, when questions were being asked and we were looking for answers, obviously there wasn't full attention given to due diligence to ensure that there's an absolute accurate answer. And, you know, it didn't occur to me to ask at that time, was there written proof of that? I took Doug at his word that there was an arrangement that would provide for that.
Okay, I just want to interject with respect that we're getting in the weeds about kind of history of interaction about a particular issue. Bill, would you like to respond to this, or do you want to move on to another question? What would you like to do?
Just about the land that British Columbia offered us after an AIP was signed. They developed a map of the lands that included some land between Henny's Camp, Beaver Cove, and I think a bit around past Beaver Cove. They're the ones that offered us the land as I guess, an enticement to get the AIP done. And so we said, well, sure. That's quite a lot of valuable land they're offering us. So that would have to go through their bosses for approval, but they did offer that land to us, the negotiators, British Columbia. And of course, part of that Treasury Board approval would include a business-to-business relationship with Western Forest Products on our treaty settlement lands. They were both going to go before the Treasury Board for approval. So that's what I know about the lands. So there is a map that was developed by the province.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have someone next? Yes, just step right up. Make sure the mic is on, please. And identify yourself and ask your question.
Good evening, Lisa Hanius. I don't know. I speak on other parts of our community and our urban people, our Nungies people that aren't political. I'm not political. But I get drawn here today because there's other stuff going on besides land resources and land claims and that. And a lot of our people aren't even at this stage right now. They're not even present. They're in addiction. They're in crack addiction, pill addiction. They're stuck. They're in grief. They're in sorrow. And somewhere along the line, our people, including my own parts of my family, are stuck somewhere way back here. So how the heck are we going to go forward into land claims and to taking over our own being here in this community and our resources when our people are stuck way back there somewhere? And so what I'm here to represent is the community and the families and their children out there. And what I want to ask is about the community wellness, and also the one issue that I have is that, just to raise awareness for the both of you, is that out in the cities, the social workers are still taking our children. The band is not being notified, and my grandson, my second grandson, first one was removed. Second one, they were trying to remove at birth. The band was not notified. I had to notify here. Our people out there aren't aware, and I have a background. I've banged heads with so many social workers up here. And going to Nanaimo feeling helpless and hopeless that my children or my grandchildren are being removed. And what I want to see is representation. I know we got the Kwakwala'zi. We're not in full delegation yet. We can find families, okay, to become foster parents. That's what we have to do. I had to become a foster parent to be a grandmother to my grandson. That's how the society, the Mama society is working out there. We have to get screened. We have to go through criminal record checks. My whole family has to get criminal record checks. And what I want to see is more representation. And I have a case conference. They want to extend another. Well, what I did was when they tried to remove my grandson at birth, I had to put a stop to it. And I said, no, that's not going to happen. And what I had to do was phone here and get Kwakwala'zi online. And I walked into my next meeting and I put them on speakerphone. But what I want to see is we got a lot of educated people. We got people with master's degree. We have a lot of lawyers out there. I want to see us in partnership of saving our families and our children. So what happens is that having the lawyer, whoever represents us in Nanaimo or in Vancouver, picking up the phone, okay, we can't make it down there, but could you go stand up for our family down there? Because even as a grandmother, I didn't have my rights. They didn't just hand the babies over to me. So what I want to see is a lot more representation out there. And if they're not notifying our bands, that's our agreement. And our agreement is with families and community in our culture. And that's not being utilized at all. I come home now, I'm working for community again. And a lot of our people, and I'm getting emotional, a lot of our people can't work. They can't even leave their house. They can't even pick themselves up or get a job or even get their grade 10, let alone 12. What I want to know is, what are we going to do about it? It took me years to get to where I am today. What are we going to do about our niece or nephew or grandchildren that are out there suffering in our communities? So I'd like to see more health and wellness. I'd like to see health and wellness in our band office, in our administration, in our department heads, because we're not communicating. I put an email out to everyone I could think of about the grief and loss in this community right now. I've only got maybe 2 positive responses about it, maybe 3. But we need to uplift this community and our people. So what I'd like to see is more delegation with our families out there, our children being removed. And if they're not notifying us, let's get on them. Because we have a worker in Nanaimo that's just scooping our children.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Bill, I believe you're first on this one.
Okay, Lisa, it's a really complicated issue that you've just brought up. You might know that Umblies are working towards being an organization that's going to take over the care of our children. Right now, we're working towards a delegated authority, and but we still have to work under the provincial guidelines. And your comment about people that can't even work because they're sick, we know that's happening, and we have to find some way to deal with that. the assistance they get from the social assistance isn't enough to take care of them. It falls way short of what's required if they're on social assistance. And I've said before that one of the things that we can do as a First Nation away from the Indian Act is we can develop our own policies in that area. We do also in our treaty document have under governance that says we will look after our own people, family and children. That'll be in the treaty document. So there are many things that we can do after we get into a final agreement that we can't do now because we're under the policies of the Department of Indian Affairs. They've shifted the responsibility for our children over to the province, and that was done without any consultation with us. So it's an area that's been worked on not only by us, but the provincial organizations, the national organizations, and you're talking about children being taken away. I was at a meeting with our relatives from the North Island, the Tribans, and they had 130 kids that were taken away. And they said, "You think you guys got it bad? We're really in bad shape with the removal of children by the province." So it's an area that we're working at. We need to assist those people that can't work more than they're being assisted now. And again, it comes down to resources. How are we going to assist them? If we give them some of our money, the way the policy is now, Department of Indian Affairs will claw that back from our budget the next year. So it's a no-win situation. But with our own agreement, we'll be able to do what we want to do. That's why I think it's so important to get away from the Indian Act. It's an act that was used to steal our lands. It's an act used to steal our children. The act they used to steal our language, and I don't see why the hell we're still in it. We need to get away from it. Do what the Monmouth did, burn the damn thing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I think, as Bill pointed out, these are very complex issues that require solutions, and we need to involve experts. I'm certainly no expert on how to deal with addictions, and it would not be proper of me to try to purport to come in and develop solutions that would address serious issues like this. But what I would see is we have an opportunity to put together think tanks of the brightest and best that we have in this nation and elsewhere that we could bring together to try to develop solutions, because doing nothing is not an option. We obviously have people in our community who are suffering and who need solutions. And so, the long term and the short term. Obviously, over the longer term, we need to do public education. We need to focus on prevention so that the next generation of our people who come along don't find themselves in addictions as well. So we need to stem the tide of all of the hurts and the social problems that are causing people to become addicted. So that would help save the next generation. Then it becomes a question of treatment. We have a generation right now where we have some people who are addicted. I don't know the magnitude of our addictions in our community. I know there's a huge concern around prescription drug addiction in the community. I'm sure that there are some really good solutions that a think tank could come up with, but again, not just a pretty report to stack on a shelf, but a report that we actually act on and, start implementing. But again, we run up against the wall of not having the resources in order to do the proper implementation. But, a public education campaign of having people go into the schools and talk to the kids is a good start. And as we go out and look for more resources, we just build on that and build on it. But again, doing nothing is not an option. And then the question of representation. There are folks who maybe aren't able or don't feel comfortable or confident coming forward and sharing their concerns. And so one step would obviously, when we develop a process of getting everyone's input, we need to create space that ensures everyone's input and participation is valued. You know, it's every voice matters. And so if you're addicted, it doesn't mean you don't have a right to say and shape the future of our nation. You know, and so we create space and everyone takes baby steps and we start, you know, getting the input from all of our members. So, I mean, it's a challenge, an ongoing challenge that we'll need to continue to address. And then I guess the whole notion of overrepresentation of children in the child welfare system. I know this is an issue for First Nations people across this country. I think a majority, overwhelming majority of the kids in care in this province are children. And I didn't realize that there were issues with our community. I thought we were relatively untouched compared to other communities. And I think Bill might have pointed out there have been attempts to find solutions to these issues at a province-wide level. There was a First Nation Leadership Council committee established to address child welfare issues. They developed a policy paper entitled Child at the Center, working on solutions to these really difficult issues. And so, you know, there hasn't been a breakthrough in finding solutions at a province-wide level on these issues. And I think the government has recently cut funding to that group, so they no longer are able to continue to advocate for solutions on these issues. And, you know, it would be great if we could have the resources to engage lawyers so that whenever a member has a child apprehension issue, that we could deploy lawyers out there to go and assist. But I think the reality is there aren't presently resources in place. And so, you know, obviously this is an important issue that needs addressing. It would be really helpful to get a sense of the magnitude of this problem. And I mean, what if we have members who have children apprehended in the United States? We have members who live there. What if we have members who are being apprehended in other provinces? You know, all of a sudden the costs become exponential when we have to engage lawyers in these different jurisdictions. So, you know, it's obviously a problem that requires attention. So again, doing nothing is not an option. And I think it, you know, recognizing it's going to take a year or two for solutions, if not longer in some cases, for solutions to these issues to be found. So that's my preliminary thought at it. But again, it's not an issue that we ignore. You know, now that it's been brought to the light of the day, it's obviously something that requires attention. Kayla Kessler.
Okay, our next question will come from the floor. Kellyanne, turn your mic on, please.
It is on, sorry. We've stopped turning it off. For me, the question, I have two sort of interrelated questions. The first is really around commitment and leadership, and I want to thank both of you for deciding to stand for this position of chief. Bill, your record is very long-standing. The accomplishments of the council, as well as obviously the ongoing challenges we have, are clear. I think that you may or may not choose to answer this part of the question given your history. But Deb, I do have a question for you. In March of this year, you were finishing up your contract with the band as coordinating the community engagement process, and you met with the chief and council and the hereditary chiefs, so as we were called, or as we are called, the Treaty Caucus, in early March. And at that time, the caucus complimented you on your hard work and how much that we enjoyed your commitment. At that time, the contract was ending, and you indicated to the caucus that you were choosing not to continue on. That contract was ending. There would have to be something new negotiated. But you indicated that your commitment was actually to your legal practice, and that you were going to be in danger of falling out of line with the requirements of the Law Society if you didn't go back to your law practice. 3 weeks later at our treaty conference, you actually stood up at the end and summarized some of the discussion, and you ended by again making that statement that you would be contributing to the band where you could, but that you were committed to your law practice. 2 weeks later, you're nominated, and now you're standing for chief. So I guess in my mind, there's a bit of a question in terms of what's happening then with the law practice, which you had indicated twice was really your priority. So that's one part of the question. The second thing is both of you have acknowledged that some of the communication and the process of involving people through the treaty negotiations, and it actually, I don't really want to talk about treaty per se, but it's like that community engagement, how we get people involved. Deb, you spoke about this 2-year process of engagement. I want to know sort of more specifically, so what does that actually look like? Because we've tried meetings, we've tried newsletters, we've tried online. We're now doing home visits, which I think is getting some involvement of people. But in order to do what you've discussed in terms of developing a plan and getting people's views, what actually would you do differently? Because you were working for 6 months, so you've got some experience in our own community with how challenging it is to get people to actually come out. So, you know, if you have any more specifics that you can offer, that would be helpful. And the same with you, Bill. You mentioned that the process of the treaty and the engagement with people leading up to the IIP vote you recognized was not working. So how would you also then enhance the ability for people to actually connect with us? Because it's easy to say, well, let's just all get together. But we have a very small group of, thankfully, people who came tonight, but we don't get very many people who come to meetings. So do you have any ideas about how we're actually going to do that? Thank you.
I guess the question would be, first of all, what was the motivation in order to seek office at this particular point in time? And I think that at that point, when I was wanting to return to the practice of law, I had a long conversation with my husband afterwards, and I said, you know what my real big concern is? I think we're heading for an inevitable no vote. And I'm really concerned about what that's going to do for us as a nation, because I don't see a lot of support. I mean, we had community meetings over a 2 or 3 month period, and as you pointed out, no one came. You know, so I think the absence of people at a meeting is really a way of the community saying we're not really happy about where things are going. And so, you know, this lack of interest can sometimes speak volumes. So if we were heading in that direction, and I could be wrong, but I think that's a serious concern that, you know, and we haven't been able to reach all of our people. So we're not going to be too much farther ahead, despite all of our best efforts. As you indicated, it's difficult to get people out and to get people interested. So at that point, I had the conversation with my husband, and I said, you know, part-time practice is an option, you know, in order to keep the Law Society happy. It's a lot more onerous with its reporting obligations, but it's something that I could do in order to put forward an alternative vision about how we can all work towards the same objective. I don't think there's any difference between you or I or Bill or anyone. We all want what's best for our community. We want what's best for our people. We want a better, brighter future for future generations. The only way we differ is how we get there. And how we get there under one vision is we go forward with the second vote in September. And there's a risk that if it's a no, well, we're going to have doors shut to us, not forever, but for a pretty long period of time. I don't think Canada and BC are going to come running to the door and say, yeah, Numgeets, 2 years later, you decide you want to get back in, and they're going to open the door and say, come in. Otherwise, a whole bunch of other nations are going to go out there, and they're going to do the same thing just to try and, you know, sweeten the pie or do whatever. So, you know, that was a serious consideration in deciding to, okay, well, I'm going to make my life really complicated now because I now need to take on not just the, you know, responsibility of leadership, but the responsibility of now having way more onerous obligations in terms of fulfilling my requirements with the Law Society and the reporting obligations that go with part-time practice. So, you know, really it's all of us are motivated by the same thing, a deep love and care about our community and the future of our community. So that for me is what was my motivation in coming forward to offer an alternative vision. And commitment, well, obviously I'm moving to part-time practice, which is now less than 25 hours a week. So, it is possible to juggle and to put all of the necessary energy into this and that. And actually, I'm known for working 20 hours a day if I have to in order to get the job done. So I don't think there's any concern that I won't be able to get the job done. I'll just not get a lot of sleep maybe over 3 years or something to that effect. But when I commit myself to something, I give it my everything. So I don't think there's any concern that I wouldn't do this job or give due attention to this job if I was chosen by the nation to lead. And then the second part of the question is, what would I do different with community engagement? Well, it comes back to where I think things were going. We're not getting people out to meetings because people obviously are not happy with the process, or they're not happy with the direction, or something to that effect. And I think the pressure of a second vote, it's really like a pressure cooker. We're trying. And, I commend the caucus and the council for the efforts at trying to engage people. It's not an issue about that at all. It's a pressure cooker where in this really tight time frame from October of last year until now, what is May the 31st, we're trying to accomplish, this whole task of getting input from our members on really important, crucial issues. I think our community is quite frankly overwhelmed. To try and eke out mandates and eke out a vision and eke out next steps in this pressure cooker time, it is really challenging. And, I'm saying there's going to be a lot of delays around the corner waiting for us, not of our cause or effect, but simply because, we've got the Chilcotin decision, we've got elections, we've got really inflexible federal and provincial mandates. I'm just saying, let's take the time to, without the pressure of a second vote, develop that together. And I think if you take away the pressure cooker, you're going to get a lot more people coming out to participate. I could be wrong, but that's my theory, is that, you take away the pressure cooker of a second vote, more people will come, more people will participate. And a 2-year window is a lot longer than it's not a navel-gazing opportunity. It's really serious mandate development about how we move forward as a nation and what is it that the people want us to do on their behalf, because we're here to serve, and that's our role. So, that is my thoughts around how we can get more people engaged. I don't think it's offering more prizes or, I think obviously we need to share more information, and we need to create a safe space where people feel they can come and safely contribute. And we need a space that's got enough time where it's not so rushed and people can feel relaxed and come forward, and the creativity will flow in a more relaxed environment than in a pressure cooker environment. Gil Kessler.
Okay, I give the Numleys more credit than what's been said here. I think when we made the plan to have a second vote, we all agreed that it's difficult to get people to meetings. We all agreed that sometimes they don't answer mail-outs. So we said, let's do the home visits. And that was on advice from people that had a second vote, that they had to go and talk to their membership one-to-one to answer their questions. So I say, let's give the plan a chance. Let's continue with our home visits. Let's have our community meetings after our home visits. And I know in my heart that the Numleys, when they see the benefits of a yes vote to the AIP and what comes after that, we'll move forward. There's so many benefits to moving past the AIP because it's all it is. It's an agreement in principle. But it allows us to move past that and start doing the very serious planning that's part of this process. We had advice from the Comox. We even hired one of their workers. We had advice from the Manus that the home visit process was the way to go. Go and talk to your people. And the other thing that they said was you have to get the young people involved because they're the ones that are going to benefit from this process. But, it's been suggested that we take a 2-year break. In my experience, if we take a 2-year break, we're going to lose about 10 years. And people are going to lose their jobs. We're going to have to start all over again. And take off 2 years and plan during those 2 years. You need resources to plan. We've experienced that. Trying to plan under DIA programming, if you don't have the resources, you can't really put your plans in place. There are consequences to standing back for 2 years. We're going to be set back probably 10 years or more, and people are going to lose their jobs. We're going to lose the good work that these people are doing for us. So it's a serious consequence. I know we did make a mistake on the first vote because we wanted to do the first vote before the provincial election, and that was a dumb mistake. And we, of course, held the vote during the Idle No More campaign. And people were very mistrustful of the federal government because of their omnibus bills, thinking that, why are we going to sign an agreement that's going to be just not honored by the federal government? A final agreement will be protected under the Constitution of Canada. There's no way the federal government will be able to get out of that agreement. So I say, let's continue with the plan, the home visits, and I'm sure that the Numgrees will make the right decision. You.
Okay, our next question will come from the floor. Robbie, we turn the mic on and identify yourself, please.
Robert Mountain. I'm here for a question, especially I had this question even before I came on council, and I want Deb and Bill to answer it, see if they actually know the answer. This is just a small part. It's just a yes or no. Do either of you know what Section 3A is of the Indian Act?
What?
Section 3A is the Indian Act. I'll tell you. As most people of you know, a lot of people know that I do a lot of research before I speak. I get out and get the facts before I say anything. I will not assume, and I will not listen to somebody else's opinion until I do the research. So Section 3A is one for the members. It's one I researched before I got on the council. And the thing with Section 3A is that chief and council get their power and authority from the majority of the band. I did the research and found out the legal meaning, the literal meaning, and the practical meaning of that verse of Section 3A. It's on the First Nations government site, Indian BC Indian site, First Nation site. Neil Starrett even defines it. And it basically means that chief and council's fiduciary duty is to look after the funds on behalf of the members. And chief and council, as that states, go to the majority of the band and get their power and authority how to spend those funds. That's a literal meaning of what chief and council is supposed to do. And that's not happening. These members are all supposed to decide where their funds go, where their revenue sharing goes, where their own source revenue goes, where their treaty money goes. That's not happening. We need to right the ship. Members tell chief and council how the money is supposed to be spent. Chief and council tells administration what the members want, how it's supposed to be spent. And that's not happening. So chief and council a chief has the power to hold any meetings, any council meetings, and get direction from the members. It doesn't have to be a scheduled council meeting. It doesn't have to be a scheduled AGM. They have the power to set up a meeting anytime they want. So the question is, what is your translation of 3A?
I believe, Bill, that you'll take this one first.
Is that 3A of what document? Pardon? All right, the Indian Act. That document. Yeah. Okay. Well, you're right in that the membership have the right to say how our own source revenues are spent. But the program dollars that we manage is governed by the Ministry of Indian Affairs. We can't change how we're going to spend that money. It's in the agreement, comprehensive funding agreement that we signed. So we did do what you were talking about with the forest revenue. We came to a meeting. We said what we should do with that monies, and the people that were there at the meeting said yes. You're right, we probably need to do more of that. Yeah.
We have the fiduciary obligation, as you say, and it's a very high standard, and failure to comply with it can result in personal liability that's not protected. So it is a very serious provision that, states clearly that there's a role for a membership in being the source of authority for chief and council. The Indian Act goes on and it provides specific examples where the members actually have to participate in votes. And so anytime there's a transaction involving land, Indian Reserve land, the members need to be involved in that. And if our monies are put into revenue or I'm not sure what the other category of the various categories of band revenues in Ottawa, obviously then the members need to be involved in those decisions. As we move forward and we get more business holdings, I'm not so sure that all of those monies, revenue and capital monies, have to actually go to Ottawa, so there's a bit more discretion. And we have, I guess what we have is a policy void where we don't have clear policies that set out what decisions need to come to the members, what decisions are within the authority of council, and what decisions are in the authority of administration. It's a recipe for conflict because people are going to be unhappy that people weren't engaged or consulted about decisions. And so, we want to avoid that conflict. We want to be honor and follow through on the requirements of the Indian Act where we need to engage with people and consult with people about expenditures. So I think it's an issue that requires attention, and it's one that can be addressed through policy solutions and a political will to go there and do that. So, thank you for bringing that to our attention. It's obviously an issue in my platform if you've had an opportunity to read it. And I would strongly advocate for policy development in order to clearly set out what decisions need to be made by Chief and Council, what are within the power of the people, and where does administration have some authority to make decisions on our behalf. Gila Councillor.
Okay, we're 3+ hours into this. I don't imagine it's going to go too much longer. We've had several questions from the floor. We're going to take one from the computer here. This is from Yvonne Guessinghouse. What is your strategy on ensuring that our citizens have the opportunity to learn more of our language, our culture, history, family ties, etc.? So, Deborah, I believe you're first on this one.
There is clearly the primary role for language, culture, and history would rest with, I believe, our cultural center. But that doesn't mean that there's not an opportunity for some form of partnership between the two organizations. And part of what we would be doing through a visioning exercise would be setting goals and objectives. And so if the goal of our nation and the vision of our nation through that exercise is to preserve our language and to ensure that our members know all about our history and about our culture, well then, that would be the marching orders to say, well, we need to go out and implement that vision and these actions. And that would involve reaching out and forming partnerships with those who are the experts at doing this, because obviously we're not the experts that could take that on. And so, again, there's a money solution in there, so it would mean going out and finding monies or finding a process by which we allocate some of our own source revenues to those priorities. So I would say that, my strategy would be involved in establishing partnerships with experts out there who can do the job, and then looking for the monies and making sure that it's part of the vision that we develop together as a nation. Gila Councillor.
Okay, thanks, Yvonne. The learning of our history, our language, and all the things that are connected to it has actually been done by the research of Honey Jacobson. She did a lot of that research, and there's binders and binders of research that she's done. So those are resources that we can use to again, if we had the resources to increase the cultural curriculum in our school, not only in our school but to the members, because a lot of the older people don't even know a lot of our history, and that's all there to be used, and that was done through the treaty process. We years ago estimated that to do a proper curriculum development in our school, we'd be looking at $300,000 to $400,000 a year, and it's probably more than that now. But again, it's resources. Where do we get the resources to do that? I say a land claims agreement. Where else are we going to get it? So again, it comes down to resources, but a lot of that has been done, and the UBISTA has a lot of the information there too. The UBISTA just recently got a call from Indiana State University about some recordings that they have of my father, that when he was working for Franz Boas in 1938, and they wanted our permission to allow that collection of recordings to be a candidate for the National Archives of the United States, which is quite a big honor. And again, those resources are there to be used. Kids learning songs, the song that I learned, the feast song, Namsa Kustwarisla, I learned that from an audio tape that was made from those old cylinder recordings. 1938 it was recorded. So, there's a lot of that stuff around. But again, we need the resources to get that out to our people. Thank you.
Okay, I think we're getting close, but you can go ahead and ask your question. Please turn the mic on there and try to make a concise question.
Okay, I had just to say that I'm quite thrilled to be back home and to be able to participate with the agreement and principle presentations. I've learned a lot since I've been here from February to now about a lot of stuff to do with the agreement and principle and just everything in my life. But anyways, my question is, if there's the yes and no. If there is a no, is there obviously going to be any treaty money? My other thought was the reason behind the second vote was because there was I think out of that, I don't know if this is even correct, 1,270 population here. And there was maybe 161 yeses and 263 noes. But I'm here just to share that we're going to be visiting you guys. But yeah, my thing was I wanted to know about the money, treaty money, if there's treaty money after, there's no. And then my thought personally is you guys can't even answer this because you don't know how to, nobody knows how to do this. Is that how do we get the people out? Nobody knows. So just had to throw that in there for you so you can use that next time if you want. And I think for me to be learning about agreement and principle is that I think it would be cool to do now because, we have everybody here that's saying, oh, we're not going to be around then. At least you guys can participate. And then I can continue learning from you guys and everybody else here. And so, yeah, so I just wanted to share that's my views. I'm seriously learning a lot, and I'm quite happy to be home and ask this question. That's about it. Thanks.
Okay, Bill, it'll be your turn.
Whose turn is it? Yours. Mine? The treaty money that you're talking about is the money that we borrowed. Yeah. Well, I've told our guys many times, don't worry about that treaty money. It's just another issue that we have to negotiate in the final agreement. I came down on an airplane with what's his name? That's part of the Nishka government, and he said, Bill, don't worry about that. You just negotiate an extra $8 or $10 million, take care of that alone. And so that's my approach. And that's what I've been suggesting to the caucus many times. What was the other one?
Is the treaty money different from the treaty resource money?
Treaty resource? Oh, right. Well, if we're not in treaty, we won't be getting any money. It's as plain as that. And then if we do take a break, it's going to take a while to get some money because the BC Treaty Commission manages the budget, and a lot of people are applying to that budget for their treaty work. And so we'll have to just get in line in the end to restart the treaty. That's why I say we're gonna lose a lot of time.
Okay, I believe the first question is around what happens if there's a no vote with treaty money. And there would be an outstanding loan of over $8 million that would essentially be sitting there if there's a no vote. That's the question that you posed. And you're right, there are no precedents around that. I don't think any nation has really gotten to that point where they have a no vote, and now what is the federal government going to do? Is it going to enforce the loan? And, you know, what if you come back to the treaty process 10 or 20 years later, or 5 or 7 years later? You know, do you then take forward the previous loan monies and add that to what you're going to negotiate as you move forward? Because if there is a no vote, there isn't the opportunity to sort of negotiate it as part of your final settlement. So there is no roadmap. We'd be entering into uncharted territory. A lot of folks keep saying, don't worry, there won't be any enforcement of that by Canada, but there's no guarantee about that. So again, it would be one of those, you know, we'd have to cross that bridge when we get to it and hope that they wouldn't enforce the loans on us. And so that would be the first part of your question. And the second part is, how do you get people out? And I think one of the sure ways of getting people out is to involve people in developing the process. You know, people are part of developing the process, then they're going to feel more comfortable with the process than if it's a process I develop all by myself or the leadership develops all by themselves. So that's one sure way to get folks out. And unfortunately, there are no shortcuts, which is why I propose a 2-year, and it's not a break. You know, I think that there's contribution funding that's available, and with a solid 2-year plan that says in year 1 we're going to do this, in year 2 we're going to do this, and at the end of that we're going to come out with unity and consensus around a go-forward strategy, then we could secure, without any break in time, funding from the BC Treaty Commission, because it's always open to any First Nation in this treaty process, not just us, to apply for contribution funding only. And that contribution funding is not repayable. So instead of borrowing $1.2 million, we could borrow the 20% contribution funding, get this work done, and then without extra debt, carry on once we've figured out what we want to do together as a nation. So that's one issue. And then again, there's no shortcuts. You know, it's just a lot of hard work in order to get proper mandates from people. You know, assume we get a yes vote. Well, what mandates do we have to go forward? It's not entirely clear unless the second vote has an overwhelming yes, in which case, yeah, the mandate is the basis on which the, you know, all of the provisions that are contained in the agreement. But again, if we end up with a second close vote, then what is the mandate? You know, if half of our people are saying yes and just a little, you know, a little over half are saying yes and a little half, under half are saying no, what is it that we're agreeing to? So obviously then, we're going to have to do the same exercise. We're going to have to establish some kind of process where the leadership goes out and finds out what is the mandate that we can carry forward for this final stage of negotiations. What is it that our people want to see in the way of fisheries in a chapter? What do we want to see in the way of shared decision making? What do we want to see in the way of revenue sharing? And how do we want to fill in the taxation gaps? We don't know what people want because we haven't had a process through which that was determined. So you can either do it, you know, take the time out now without accumulating a whole bunch of debt to figure that out, or, you know, do it later. And, you know, I would hope that that would occur later, that we would have our people involved in determining the go-forward strategy and the mandates. So those are my responses to your question. Thank you.
Okay, unless there's strong opposition to the idea, we'll take one more question. I can count on that. Go ahead.
Dixon Taylor. My rationale for deciding to get up was as a follow-up to Robbie's question. And while I make this statement, I'm in all seriousness when I make the statement. And it's this. Who knows what the chief does? We've got half a dozen councillors here. Who knows what they do? Does anybody? All I know is in almost 10 years since I've returned home, I don't know what chief and council do. I don't know what the administration office does. I had some experiences with my daughter getting funding through the post-secondary program, where I had to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and talk to people at McMaster University so that they would, that's a institution like UBC, roughly 40, 50,000 students there. And they had to change their funding, the way they handled the funding of students, so that they would match what the Numbees Nation was doing. A little piss pot of an organization that had 30 students maybe, and we're being asked to try and go around. So I asked this question. What do we really know about our chief and council? I'm talking about transparency. Whether it's you, Bill, that gets reelected as chief, or you, Debbie, that gets elected as new chief, we need you to be more transparent. No question. We've talked a little bit about vision. We talked about goals and objectives. Those are all good. But what I want to do is say this to you. I want a commitment, not only from chief, but also council, that you guys take upon yourselves the idea of studying, learning about your role, what your role is as chief, what your role is as council. We need to ask the same thing of our senior administrators, all of our program heads. We don't know what they do. We only know that they do a lot of stuff and cost a lot of money, but we don't really get any direct benefit from it. So we can define the role, and then we define the responsibility, which we kind of do, but nobody has a job description as far as I can see. If you have a job description, people like me can come in and evaluate whether or not you're doing a half-decent job. We can also make a correction or two. But the most important thing that's missing in what my experience has been with chief and council and all of the administration of the Numbees men is accountability. Accountability. We need you guys to be accountable to us, just like it was stated. So you got to come clean. And you got to come clean prior to actual things happening, because that's when we can do things in a rational way. And so what I want is a commitment. Tell me how you're going to define your role, responsibility, and accountability as chief, and also send it down through your council and all your program heads, including your senior administrators.
Okay, Deborah, I believe you're first on this one.
Thank you for your question. It's one of the issues that I raised in my platform. So for more information about the background, I would direct you to go there. But essentially, there needs to be more checks and balances in place, and there needs to be a clearer identification of roles and responsibilities. So I would initiate a review of existing policies that are directed towards ensuring accountability and transparency. And I'm sure that there probably are spending limits in place, but they're not transparent. You know, I went on the web page to look at what policies there were. There's the election guidelines, there's the conflict of interest guidelines, but there aren't a whole lot of other policies. So if they exist, well, we need to get them up on there so members can see them and know what the framework is for accountability in the nation. And if there are no policies, well, then we need to fill that policy void, because it's just a recipe for disharmony and dissatisfaction in the community. The sooner we fill that gap, the sooner we're going to have happier people who clearly understand what the authorities and roles and responsibilities of our leadership is. And again, we need to have more community involvement in defining how we move forward in the future. There needs to be space created in all of this where our members have a voice in saying, what are our economic strategies going to be? And, you know, we don't just wake up one day to find out that we have a new business, but we were actually part of that process of defining and determining our economic strategy. So that would be my response to your question, Gil Kesla.
And Bill, please.
Okay, I thought we were fully accountable. We have job descriptions for all of our staff, and and a lot of people think that the chief councillor has a lot of power. He has no power at all. He's a spokesman for the council. He speaks on council decisions. That's one of his roles. Another role is to chair the meetings of the council, chair the meetings of the annual general meetings, and I am an ex officio of all the committees. We are actually reviewing the committees with the help of Kelly. We've already made one major change, that the council shouldn't be involved in hiring. That's why we have our CEO. So that's one of the changes that has been made as a result of Kelly's work in volunteering to review the portfolios and responsibilities. So I think probably I agree we shouldn't get into a shouting match that the Numgleys chief and council are probably the most accountable around. Our audits are all available on the web, and we make reports at general meetings. So I always thought we were accountable. We'll have to relook at that, Dixon. Okay, well, as you know, the chief and council have to have regular meetings to talk about the requirements of the programs, and that's with the help of our chief administrator. And so, you know, we meet twice a week, twice a month to do that. Our minutes are all available for review if requested. So, yeah, so thank you.
Okay, last question, Longo. Turn it on and let her fly.
Oh, it's on already? Oh, you're just a glorified councillor, Bill.
I know.
I forgot I was told somebody I was going to ask this question about the head negotiator for land claims, Eric Woodhouse. He has two positions. He's a lawyer, and he's also the head negotiator for the land claims. And somebody asked me, does he get two checks? I said, I don't know.
I don't know how that works. I said, I know he gets paid to be a lawyer. He's got to be paid for being the head negotiator. And they asked, well, how come you don't hire somebody else? You know, because like me, I can remember when Mike used to tell Eric, you do this while he was on the phone doing something else. So don't take this the wrong way, Bill, but Uncle Stan told me, he said, 2 heads are better than 1.
Okay, Bill, I guess
Well,
you're first.
you're right. With the tragic loss of Mike Roger, we needed to keep the ship going straight, and Eric agreed to take that job. The thinking was that we would be through an AIP, and at that time we would hire a chief negotiator at that time. But we didn't get through the AIP. So as it is, he doesn't work for us full time. He just does the work as required, and as I say, the plan was to hire another negotiator once the AIP was finished. There are lots of negotiators around. Thank you.
I believe we're not finished. Deborah's still got something to say.
Stanley Hunt?
Stan, just one moment. Deborah hasn't responded yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just so excited, Debbie.
Well, I think the question is very specific. It's a request for information that I don't have the knowledge about, so I don't know if he gets paid twice. I know he has 2 positions, and Bill's offered the rationale as to why until after the AIP, so I don't have anything to add. I have no knowledge to add to this particular question.
Okay, very good. Stan has requested a brief moment on the floor there. Go ahead, Stan.
Conflict. Perceived. If it's perceived, it's a conflict. But one of the things that I just wanted to make a comment about when I was on council, because of the council travel, one of the things that I suggested, because every time you go for a meeting, we wanted you to bring back some sort of written information about what you thought you saw. If you didn't bring back any information or a report back, you return the money that was given to you. And you got to remember that most of the councillors that go for meetings 2 or 3 days, you're looking at between $1,200 and $1,800, $1,200 and $1,800. So that's a lot of money for a councillor to be sitting down there and doing other business instead of sitting at the meeting and recording however feeble your report's going to be. And that goes for everybody, especially the chief. You can't just wander off and just say I was doing band business, or when you're questioned. But we passed that. We passed that thing because it's our history. I don't know if you guys are aware, but pretty near all the meetings we've been through, the KDC, all the meetings, the different tribal councils we belong to, I have those records at home. And you know the strange thing about it, I can go back and I can tell you exactly what you're going to say here about fishing, because you haven't changed your idea about how it should be, because we don't have a plan. So it's just a little thing about this transparency thing. And when you're going on a meeting, if you don't bring back a report, because it's our history, so that I can read it 3 weeks or 3 months from now, you give that damn money back again. That's all there is to it.
Okay, Deborah, I believe you're first on this one.
Okay,
And then,
just a short answer. I don't remember that council decision where the money would be returned if you didn't make a report. And I've been around for a long time, and I don't recall that decision. So, but getting back to what you're talking about, I think that council should make reports when they go on banned business. And your comment about me just leaving whenever I want to, I don't agree with that. When I go to meetings, I stay at the meetings. And if I leave a day early, I make sure that the other councillor stays there. So we're always represented. But I agree that councillors should make reports. And that's one of the areas that we're working with Kelly in reviewing the responsibilities of the portfolio holders. Are you listening to me? Thank you.
There's not much more to do other than concur. Accountability would involve doing proper reports, because there's no point in personally acquiring all this information without sharing with the nation. The whole purpose is to keep everyone informed so that we're all able to be part of strategizing on how we move forward, fully informed about what the issues are. Gail Kessler.
Okay, what we're going to do now is move to the closing remarks. I believe Bill opened with the remarks, so Deborah, if you'd like to make your closing remarks, and then Bill will follow, and that will conclude our meeting.
Yes, I think the one of the central issues in this election is the question of whether we proceed with the second vote or whether we take some time and go away and do some full mandate development and developing visions. Under one approach, we would move forward and spend between 1.2 to 3.2 million at 600,000 a year. I don't believe we could conclude an agreement in 2 years simply because of the delay factor. We have the Chilcotin decision. We have an election coming up. That's going to inevitably lead to delays. And then it's going to take time to move mandates. Federal fisheries mandates haven't been moved since 2007. So I don't think miraculously we're going to get a breakthrough and all of a sudden we're going to have new fish mandates in 2 or 3 years. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of energy to do that. And then another option is if we move forward with the second vote, we're going to end up with, we're not going to have unity. We still have a divided community, and I don't imagine the results of the next vote are going to be too much different than they were. You know, there'll be a very close vote one way or the other, and that's just going to leave us divided as a community. I'd rather see us go forward united, and under the pathway that I propose, we would take that time, and it's not a timeout per se, it's time to do the work, to do the mandate development that needs to get done. And it's not wasted time by any means, and it's not navel-gazing by any means. It's doing the work that gives the leadership the proper direction so they know where we need to go with fisheries, where we need to go with taxation, where we need to go with revenue sharing, where we need to go with shared decision-making, those outstanding issues. And they need to know what we like and don't like about the agreement, because if there's an opportunity to change things so we can get the support at the end of the day, well, let's change them. And we're not going to get that through osmosis. We're going to take it through the hard work of working together as a community, defining what our interests and our concerns are. So that would be my proposal to you, that we take time to do the visioning and the development of options and mandates together. And on the economic front, you know, we need to do some focus at home in this community. We need to get some economic growth in this community. And yes, it's challenging because we're an island, but with creativity, there are things that can be done. And so, you know, we just need to work hard to get that going. And accountability and transparency is an issue for the community. And it's not intended as a criticism on Chief and Council. It's just saying, you know, we've reached a point where we need more policies. And so let's take the time to do that work and develop those policies so we can bring harmony and unity back to the community. So those are my closing comments. I thank you all for taking the time to come out this evening. I thank you for your interest and love for your community. To all of you out in Cyberland, hello and good night, and thank you for participating. And let's all work together to build a better future for our nation. Gila Kasla.
Okay, I still believe that we need to follow the plan that was developed leading up to the September vote for the AIP. I have confidence in the Numbeast that they will make the right decision so that we can move forward and make the real changes that we can in negotiating to a final agreement. There's so many things that we can do after the AIP, so many things that we can do with money that we don't have to pay back. And we'll be working on all the different important issues leading up to a final agreement. If we step back now, I'm positive that we're going to lose probably 10 years or more in this process. And I'm not sure that we can access 20% of the non-loan funding to plan for 2 years. I'm not sure whether that would be available to us. And again, there's just so much we can do in the next stage to make things better for our people. And as I said, we can make plans for housing. We can make plans for more money for education, more money for everything. If we step back, we're just going backwards, and I'm for going forward. Thank you. Gila Kesa.
Thank you, everybody, and that concludes the All Candidates meeting. I just want to urge everyone to vote either by mail-in or at the advance poll on Friday, this Friday, and if not, then on May 9th, Election Day. And anyone can call me anytime for questions regarding this this process. Thank you. Thank you. You're very welcome.